open session. First item, as usual, is resident concerns.
Good evening, Martin Benson, 21 Deacon Hunt Drive. Mr. Martin, your dismissive remarks toward Fred Smith's Nazi contingent Facebook comments and the lack of respect and empathy shown towards Mr. Cadillac when he sought to be heard by the DEIC was disgraceful. Rather than working to address the problem and unite the community, you instead launched into a divisive political attack filled with erroneous statements directed at supporters of the colonial mascot. That's not leadership, Mr. Chairman. Last year, while serving as clerk of the select board, you had no problem announcing when both Kira Wilson-Cook and Ginny Krimmer wished to speak during portions of meetings not open to public comment in order for them to launch attacks on the sitting select board chair. However, as chair of the DEIC, you denied Mr. Cadillac, who survived the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia, the opportunity to speak when the topic of discussion was a definition of anti-Semitism. That's not equitable leadership, Mr. Chairman. Your heinous comments at the last select board meeting displayed a breathtaking lack of sensitivity to any other viewpoints other than your own, while devaluing Mr. Cadillac's lived experiences. Acting defensively, you went on to justify your comments by insinuating that you were Jewish as a way to silence Mr. Cadillac's objections. That's not honest leadership, Mr. Chairman. When the police investigation of the Zoom bombings of the school committee, an investigation you voted for, didn't support your narrative, linking the Zoom bomber to the supporters of the colonial mascot, you refused to acknowledge your error and apologize. That's not accountable leadership, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the public records request for the text messages of the school committee members during the October 15th, 2020 and December 17th, 2020 meetings, which have been sought for more than a year and a half, the school committee has engaged in one dilatory tactic after another. Multiple defenses of the school committee and the school district have all been rejected by the Secretary of State's office. When confronted in the latest appeal with 200 specific time-stamped requests of members' text messages, the school district denied that members were text messaging. This is notwithstanding the school committee's written admission in an OML response that multiple members were text messaging with one another during the October 15th, 2020 meeting. The school committee's refusal to comply with the law is the reason why these records requests are so costly. Colluding with the school committee and the school administration in fighting the production of public records is not ethical leadership, Mr. Chairman. At the last select board meeting, Mr. Mangiarotti mentioned that the town had just celebrated Earth Day, but made no mention of a Patriots' Day celebration. The cancellation of Patriots' Day was never discussed during any select board meetings. Additionally, the town has not issued a response to my records request to this matter, which is in direct violation of the public records law. Mr. Chair, did you tell Mr. Mangiarotti in private not to lend the traditional town support to this year's Patriots' Day celebration?
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, real town leaders reconcile multiple perspectives ahead of their personal agendas, and that is the pinnacle of honorable town leadership.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll go ahead. First thing, chair update. There are several things I have today. First of all, 1 week from tonight is town meeting, 7 o'clock in the high school auditorium. Please join us. Second is the, hold on, I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop for a second. I see that some people are raising their hands for public comment in the participants. Hold on. Justin, could you call on the two people that have their hands raised for resident
yes.
concerns?
Yep. We have a call-in user number 1. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Tara from West Acton, and I want everybody to vote for the electric vehicle for the apartment dwellers. I feel like that's really important for people to do because I, for one, lived in an apartment building. I've lived several times in apartment buildings, but in Acton in particular, the ruthless landlords and property managers make it almost impossible to get anything done We had to organize over months just to get one of the dryers fixed and to get the leaks in the roof fixed. We had to engage a volunteer lawyer. We need the apartment advocate. We need to have government step in and make it possible for people to get EVs because the prices are coming down, used, and people are actually getting them from friends and gifts. And so we need to be able to charge them in the apartment complexes. And I urge everybody to vote for Article number 51. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have one other that it's listed as New View, but they show as Acton. So go ahead and just say who you are.
I forgot that I was on a different Zoom account. This is Franny Osman, 16 Half Moon Hill. I have two items for citizens' concerns, and they each take about 1.5 minutes. I wanted permission to share them both.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. The first is about transportation lately. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and so people sometimes write to me about transportation concerns. And I've heard concerns recently about a sudden decrease in available rides through Crosstown Connect. One rider was turned down for her usual trip to her volunteer job in the next town. Another resident's home health aide who has a minor disability and depends on the vans to get to work was turned down. It turns out that the difficulty meeting the needs is related to a staffing issue where they're down a driver. And it's so important that our services should be set up with buffers to prevent people's lifeline transportation to be upended so easily. Our dispatchers should have sufficient tools. They should be sending people to the taxi program if they can't say yes to a ride. And then with the taxi program itself having its funding ending, Acton has to get signed on with the Uber program that several other nearby towns have joined. I hear that we're signing on to that at the start of the next fiscal year, and that's a really important step that I want to thank you for. We also have to develop relationships not just with Rides by Joanne, but with other taxi and livery companies. When this kind of staffing issue occurs, the rider requesting service from the dispatcher doesn't have to know about it. The dispatcher should just be advised to arrange a ride from another provider and fund that ride with money saved from the lack of service based on the missing staff member. In other words, get the dispatchers to yes, as Austin Saganowitz and I like to say.
You're halfway through, by the way.
What?
Your time is halfway through.
Okay, good. My next one. The other comments is about language interpretation at town meeting, which we haven't done in the past. I think it's an effort worth trying. The new renter-centered organization, Housing and Climate Justice for Acton, has been looking into it, and I know that someone from that group wrote to David Martin about the town offering interpretation next year. This year, however, that group is offering language interpretation with special headsets for this town meeting. We've confirmed interest by Chinese speakers. In general, the cost for an interpreter is $120 to $800 per language per night and $400 to $600 per night for the headset technology for up to 2 languages. This year, we will be spending $520 for the service for one night of the meeting. My request to the town is that you use our experience this year to inform your decisions about future years, that you consider pitching in financially toward the small cost this year. Language interpretation will help us bring more people to town meeting. And also note that if the town owned the equipment, it could be used for many different public programs. I believe that the League of Women Voters Acton Area and Acton Boxborough United Way would be good partners to work on this effort with. We haven't reached out to them. I know it's late for this year, but I want you to know that there will be interpretation happening in a small way as a start. What better welcome could our town show to voting citizens whose English are not proficient than offering interpretation at this height of democratic participation that town meeting is. Thanks very much.
Okay, now the remarks do seem to be over. I have 2 more things in the chair update. The second thing is that the school committee announced that a new student-led process, that a student-led process has proposed a new name for the mascot. It's the Revolution. The school committee will be taking their final vote on that at their next meeting. And finally, several of us on the board went to the Hearts Corporation facility in town this past week. Hearts is 100 years old, over half of that in Acton. They manufacture interior fabrics for cars and have relationships with most car makers. I have to say that their manufacturing operation here is pretty amazing, especially considering that it's in the heart of a suburban neighborhood. Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I was honored last week to attend the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce's annual meeting where they recognized our Tom Tidman, Natural Resources Director, with a Lifetime Achievement Award. And it was a great event, and it was great recognition for Tom, who, as many people know, is retiring this summer, pretty soon, actually. So it was great for him to get that award, and it was fun to be there at that event. I wanted to thank the 12 employees who came here last Tuesday late afternoon and sat in this room and worked through the 2,000 clickers that we needed to clean, replace batteries for, test, and whatever else they were doing for all 2,000 of them. And in police report, there were only 2 that needed to be discarded. So we're in good shape. We have 1,998 clickers for town meeting next week. Acton Public Nursing is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. There'll be a celebration tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. at 30 Sudbury. And Memorial Day parade and ceremonies will be Monday, May 30th, beginning at the high school at 10 a.m. And they will, parade will go up through Hayward and then end at the town common, where there'll be a brief ceremony. And then it'll go down Concord Road and arrive at Woodlawn, and there'll be another brief ceremony. So any questions about that, please let us know.
Thank you. Member minutes? Dean?
So two quick ones. One, members of the Department of Public Works Facility Study Committee and the town manager did a tour of the Westford Highway Department building last week. It was a fantastic building. It made us extremely jealous. And it gave us a lot of great ideas. So that process of coming up with a replacement for our now 50-year-old building is proceeding. Secondly, as we all know, Carol Spinney, who grew up here in Acton and later on became famous as Big Bird, we're going to be naming a street after him in the not too distant future. There is a really good exhibit about Carol Spinney and his time in Acton and a lot of his history and his relationship with the town. That exhibit was placed today at the Solarium at the Memorial Library. I'd encourage everybody to take a look at it. It's a great piece of history, and we're really indebted to Tony Norton, who actually owns most of the pieces of memorabilia that you'll see there. So people should take a look at that. It's a great piece of local history.
Thank you. Anyone else? Fran, go ahead.
Just quickly, I wanted to thank actually John Mangiarotti. I had the opportunity to sit in on an online session and an in-person session of the group from UMass that gave the community many times, for input about the hiring of a DEI director/officer. And I thought it was extremely helpful. I ended up attending the library session on Saturday. It was hard to leave. I didn't leave. I just have to say, I'm thankful for the process, and although this person is going to be hired, I hope we can get past the adversarial feelings and move toward equity and inclusivity.
Thank you. Imogen?
Nothing new on my end. I just wanted to address some of the citizens' concerns that were made. Regarding the Crosstown Connect, is there any way we can find out more info on this and see if there are any gaps in service that we need to address, or do you know who that would go through?
I would ask the town manager.
So the speaker is the chair, Fernie is the chair of the TAC, and she works closely with Austin Saganowitz, who helps oversee transportation programs internally. So that work is underway. I think she was just making it aware to you all.
Great.
That's underway.
Awesome, perfect. And then great news about language interpretation, and also want to echo what Fran said about the work that the DEIC has done, and the progress that we're making towards hiring someone, and also to address some of the concerns that have been floating. I think that every single one of us on this board, I can't speak for anyone, but I do have a sense that all of us do believe that discrimination is absolutely not tolerated in Acton. It's not something any of us ever want to be complicit in. So to recognize that if people have felt that their experiences, their lived experiences, their ancestral experiences weren't acknowledged, that, we're sorry about that. That should not be the case. But I think that we all need to understand there are differences between types of discrimination. When we talk about racial discrimination, that's separate from talking about ethnic discrimination. And I think that all types of discrimination are completely unacceptable, but there are spaces in which we talk about certain forms of discrimination, and that's just a way for us to try to attack a huge, very often systemic problem. So I will leave it at that, but just want to thank everyone.
Thank you. Jim, did you have something?
Yeah. Thanks to the staff, I now have the list of the 20 people who have joined committees during 2021. And I'm not going to read them out loud because that's just going to take time, but I am going to send them individual notes and just make sure that they know that they're appreciated. It's been a wonderful thing for me to see as the liaison to the VCC that at a time when volunteerism had been, falling, that Acton is stepping forward, and we're gaining more people than we are losing. And if we can, so we're even able to fill like all these new committees that we're creating. It's a great thing. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, we have a public hearing, and I'm going to read the notice. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on May 9th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually at actonmad.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of 42 Knox LLC, Troy Gunther, for a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 42 Knox Trail. The applicant proposed to construct a building, trade shop to manufacture and store stone walls. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available at http://doc.actonmad.gov/dsweb/view/collection-14812/collection-14831. Hello.
Hello, I'm Troy.
Hi, and welcome.
This is Rob, the engineer.
Great, so please tell us. Oh. My microphone is on. Yes. You have to press the button. There you go.
There we
Anyway,
go.
welcome. Please tell us what you're proposing.
Hi, so my name's Troy Ginther. I'm a local resident. I grew up in town. We construct stone walls. We've got a patent on the process, and we've been working in this neighborhood for 15 to 20 years between rentals down the street, and now we own the land that we're working on and have been there. So we build stone walls at our shop. We manufacture them there. They're all custom. It's a very simple process, and everything works out of Knox Trail. Currently, we're outside, so we're very dependent on weather and very tough situations. So we're trying to build a new facility for the gentlemen that build these walls.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Select Board members. Rob Levesque from our Levesque Associates, representing Troy and Natural Stone Wall Solutions. So I have a set of plans and applications that are before your board. We've also received a number of comments from different departments and also from a peer review consultant. So understanding that there's a lot of information, if it pleases the board, what I'd like to do is make a brief presentation regarding the plans, and then probably paraphrase some of the key points in some of the review, and then address those and then come back to you at a later date. So if that's okay with the chair and the board, I'll start that way.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. So what you have before you is an existing conditions plan. To the bottom of my plan is Knox Trail. So that's the existing subdivision road. The industrial properties are all off of that. There's an existing building that was a repair shop that's been there for years. There's the adjacent property, which is being included, portion of which is being included in this proposal. We plan on splitting that part or that parcel generally in half. And I say generally because it's not quite, half, but generally in half, and utilizing, as they do now for their process, utilizing that area, except for right now, it's outside. They'd like to bring it inside. So there's a proposed 10,780 square foot, I think it is. Don't hold me to that number. 1 second. Okay, so sheet C4, if you have that on your, I don't know if you have that on your computers, but sheet C4 is the layout plan. This shows the proposed layout. So, and I'll confirm that number for you. Yeah, so 10,780 square foot proposed building. So this would be a typical metal building that would house call it the process. They have 2 lines, generally 2 lines that they run. So again, these are sections of wall that are built essentially on their face, and integrated concrete based on a patented detail. They're then picked up, placed on a flatbed truck, brought to the location, placed in place, tooled together, and then a beautiful product. So they'd like to do that inside. So what you have here is there's an existing curb cut now on the left side of your plan, or that's the south side. We'd like to utilize that existing curb cut, keep the existing building. We're proposing the new building just to the right of that. And then we have a second curb cut that we're proposing. The yard space that you see is the lighter area with the 12 parking spaces here, and I think it's 6 on the other side. The hatched area that you see is the landscaped area around the outside, which is required for open space. We have a landscape detailed plan and some grading and drainage. Are there any questions before I skip forward? Any questions on the layout itself? Hearing none. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but this is the proposed grading plan. It does not require a lot of grading. The site is fairly flat. We just would grade this so that we can properly pick up the stormwater runoff that would be resulting from the new impervious surfaces. We've designed a stormwater management system that meets the DEP standards that came out in 2008, which are the current standards. All of the regulatory stormwater requirements are tied to those standards. We have to match pre- and post-development runoff flows. We have to handle water quality and a number of other, there's 10 standards that we have to meet with a project like this, and we have a complete stormwater report that's been provided to the town and to the peer review engineer. So they've looked at that, and that drainage system
I had a question before we got too much further.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was wondering if the folks at home are able to see the diagram?
No, but the folks at home can look at the diagram in the packet.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
Or it's also linked from the notice of the public hearing, but it's in our packet and linked from the notice in the public hearing. That's
Great,
actually
thanks.
what I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So sheet C6 shows the detail of a subsurface drainage system. So because of the nature of the site and the size of the site, and the fact that there's really no seasonal high groundwater that we encountered, we're able to place a subsurface infiltration system to get the proper recharge required to meet the stormwater standards. So we don't have a typical surface basin that you might see in other locations. So underground, the nice thing is during winter months when the ground is frozen, that's not an issue. So these work quite well. We have an isolator row that we've included in that subsurface drainage system so that it filters out any potential material that might get into the system to potentially foul the system. That said, we also have a treatment train prior to that where we have deep sump catch basins. Those then tie into a water quality unit. So water quality is paramount, as well as the recharge that the DEP standards require. So we've designed our system to those standards. That has been reviewed by the peer review. I'm not aware of any substantive comments that were issued based on the actual design of the drainage system. So that's sheet C6.
Before you switch sheet, can I just ask a question? Is that infiltration from parking or from the roof of the new building?
It will incorporate both.
Both. Okay, thank you.
So sheet C7 is a landscape plan. Your zoning regulations are pretty intricate with regard to open space requirements, landscape requirements, photometric lighting requirements, et cetera. So we looked closely at those. We've provided landscaping, the perimeter landscaping that you can see on, we'll call that on the south or the left side of the plan, or plan top, which would be the west side, and then the north side. Are pretty heavily planted. I would say we met the requirements in those areas. One of the things that was commented on in one of the peer review comments was what we did or didn't show in the front, and that's because there's already trees planted along the front and there was a fence that is already screened. So that's something to consider and think about. In addition, one of the comments that we also received was related to sidewalks. There's a requirement for sidewalks. There are no sidewalks on Knox Trail. So it wasn't that we forgot them. We figured that would be a discussion point. We're well aware of the requirement, but also from a practicality standpoint, the owner was hoping to discuss that with the select board. We do have a photometric plan, which shows the foot candles. Essentially, these are dark sky. This is dark sky compliant lighting, LED downlit, and the spillover, there's no spillover at the property line. It shows the foot candles are 0 at the property line. Not to say if you look into the site you wouldn't see lighting, but there's really no spillover on the ground to the adjacent properties. There was a comment from the planner that requested that we confirm the Kelvin, which we don't have on that. We can certainly provide that. We'll check with our lighting designer on that. And I think they wanted a cut sheet to make sure they understand what they actually look like. We reference it on our plan, but they'd like to see a cut sheet of that, which is perfectly logical to us. I have a series of details which will probably bore the heck out of you, how we're going to construct things. If there's anything you would like to see on the plans that I've already been through, that's generally the site plan set. And if you still have time for us, I'd like to go through briefly some of the just main comments, bigger piece comments, and then we're going to address any housekeeping items between now and the next available meeting, if that's okay. Fair enough?
Fine, that sounds good.
Great. So while I'm going through the comments, I'll just flip back to the layout sheet. So again, that's the layout of the proposed site with the existing building and the new. So I will, first of all, we have a letter dated May 5th from the planning department. There are a few key items. There's a number of just housekeeping items, but there's a few key items that I think are worth discussing that you may have some feelings about. Number one, I mentioned the sidewalks. So they do comment that the sidewalks, and if it's okay, I'll read just this item. This is item number 5 from the letter. Zoning bylaw section 10.4.3 requires that sidewalks must be built along the site's frontage of 402.9 feet. The plan does not address the sidewalk requirement. The Select Board may waive the sidewalk requirement if it finds that such sidewalk is not necessary for the safe movement of pedestrians and bicyclists. The Board generally does not waive this requirement without equivalent effort elsewhere or monetary contribution to the town sidewalk funds. More generally, to the fund for walking, bicycling, and transit improvements. Based on the Board's standard contribution rate of $50 per linear foot of sidewalk, the applicant could offer a donation to the sidewalk fund in lieu of constructing the sidewalks in the amount of $20,145. The applicant should address the sidewalk requirement. So that was one item that we were hoping to discuss with you this evening. There are no sidewalks on the rest of the subdivision. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but we're just making you aware of that. Maybe Mr. Gunther could speak to, his opinion of that, if that's appropriate.
Please.
All I can say is I'm excited about putting this building up, but this is a self-funded project. I'm not a developer. I'm not a bigwig in town. So when you see items like this, I want to be proactive and help the town in any way possible. But as Rob said, there's no sidewalks on the street. That was kind of surprising to us. We've already kind of put some trees up in the front before we even thought about building. I'm a landscaper. We like to keep things looking clean. This was brought up to me in the last couple of days. We're site contractors. If we have to put one in, we can self-perform and put a sidewalk in. That would technically, in my mind, go from A to B and have no beginning or end. I'm flexible on trying to help the town on this fund, but it just seems like it's a civil request, but.
That's very typical for us, but we can get to that specific question. I don't know. I think we probably should get to the end and keep, all
Sure,
the issues,
okay.
then we'll discuss them at the end.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And we'll also probably take public comment on them.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Item number 12 from the same letter was regarding the Board of Health prior to the approval of the site plan / special permit, that they would like the septic system to be submitted and approved. So we are aware of the Title V requirements, and obviously with the new building, there is an existing septic system. It was looked at. There's some discussion regarding that. We're well aware, but we were thinking that while these items are often done in concert, there also could be separate silos, and that submittal to the Board of Health under Title V could be done shortly after approval, knowing that you have a building and you're designing a septic system based on something that's been approved by the Select Board. So that was our goal. So we would like to do it a little bit out of order, if that is in fact out of order, in the way that the town normally does that. But respectfully, if we could do it that way, we would. If the Select Board decides they need to see a septic system and have that approved, we could do that as well. Obviously, we would do what's appropriate. So that's the planning letter. We have a peer review consultant, GCG Associates. They have reviewed, and I'll go real quick through this because I think most of them are pretty straightforward to us, and we'll plan on addressing all the comments. The first one was that they would like us to add meets and bounds description to the plans. The plans were surveyed. They would just like to see the meets and bounds on the actual property line, so no problem there. They had mentioned that because of the Google Earth images of the site, and that they feel that an earth disturbance permit would be required for any disturbance over 40,000 square feet. That's not a problem. We have the plan set together. We certainly will provide that as requested. The next one is sediment pile out front. I think they're planning on removing that, so that should be addressed, and it shouldn't be an issue. The next one was site distance. We'll provide them with site distance analysis. That's not a problem. The layout, there was a question about the number of employees. I believe it's 6, is that correct? I'll speak to that.
Yeah, there's 6 people working at this site.
Okay. Loading area should be identified on the plan. That's easy to show, no problem. Solid waste management, they want to know where the dumpster is. We'll show that for sure. Again, this is a little bit of a dynamic operation, so we were thinking of the yard space and screening things in, but certainly we'll show the dumpster location. Sidewalks at the frontage again. They want a test pit to confirm based on the seasonal high ground. They have a question on seasonal high groundwater, so we'll make sure we confirm that for them. Drainage calculations should be updated with hydraulic soil group A. There was just a little subtlety in the stormwater report that we'll make sure that they're comfortable with. Stormwater infiltration chambers, inlets should be equipped with a weir. They want, it's a kind of an engineering detail, which we're happy to do that. It helps handle first flush of the system, so that's no problem. This project will disturb more than 10,000 square feet of land, so it requires a land disturbance permit. That's, again, similar comment. And then they would like to see the estimated trip generation. So under the ITE manual, Transportation Engineers Manual for trip generation, there is a calculation that can be done. It's typically done by a very specific engineer, a traffic engineer, and there's a cost to that, and it's kind of a general calculation. A lot of times you'll see it with drive-through restaurants, et cetera. In this particular case, as mentioned, this is a grassroots operation, so in the event that they could explain or provide a narrative to the select board, I think that would be helpful to the applicant. I think they'd be happy to do it. But again, it's based on their specific operation. It's not a general trade. It's their, I think we could do a better job of depicting the trips peak hour and throughout the day to you than could a general traffic study, and it would save them some money for sure. So we'd like you to at least to consider that respectfully. That's the engineering letter. I'm doing my best to keep moving. There's another letter from engineering.
If you could hold just a second, do we have that peer review in the? Yeah. Okay, I didn't notice it. If you know where it is, that's fine. Okay. So please go ahead.
There's a little bit of interdepartmental communication regarding traffic again. A few other comments that I think mimic the others. The Board of Health comments. And they want to make sure that emergency vehicles can sweep through the site. So there's a path analysis we can show. So I mentioned the Title V. There's a water letter. It's pretty straightforward stuff. We understand what they're looking for. They provided us with some other information related to the building. And so I think that's the gist of the bigger comments. I know it's a lot of information. I know I went quickly, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have through the chair. And again, I have the plans and the letters, and we intend to address all those and ideally request a continuance to your next available meeting, assuming that gives us the time to address things so that we're not wasting your time.
Okay, thank you for that. John, does the planning department have any kind of presentation or notes that they'd like us to think about?
Yes, Planning Director Kristen Guichard is here virtually. Kristen, did you want to respond to that, please?
Sure. I was going to let Kayla Sauer take that question, if that's all right with you.
Yes, please go ahead, Kayla.
Hi there. Thank you very much. The only other thing that I would note that Mr. Levesque didn't call out is there's some discrepancy in the floor area ratio calculations. What we are calculating based off of what's included in the narrative is a floor area ratio of 0.201. The max floor area ratio for the zoning district allowed is 0.2, so it's a little bit over. But what the applicant included in the application as a total floor area ratio is 0.198. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy, and we want to make sure that gets figured out before we move forward.
Okay. Are there any conditions which the planning department would propose, or none came up?
At this time, the only condition that we would have would be regarding an approval not required plan. At this time, the planning division would not recommend approving the application until all the comments are addressed.
Okay. And the two things that the applicant brought up, instead of doing a formal trip study, are there other precedents that the planning department has for not doing a formal trip study to evaluate traffic?
We do not.
I'm sorry.
I think in this particular case, hi, this is Kristen Geisha here. In this particular case, I think that we could consult with GCG and possibly the engineering department to check on that. I don't believe the chip generation would be that high in this particular case, but I think we'd want to confirm that with the engineering department and GCG.
Okay. So we'd want to do that. And then, finally, the question that I wanted to ask you was that the Board of Health handles the septic system. That's not really part of the site plan permit, is it?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The Health Department recommended approval of the septic plan prior to approval, but that's ultimately up to the board's decision on whether you would rather have that conditioned for approval.
Before we move forward with any discussion, do any of you have any questions for Kayla? Okay, any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I'd love to get a, well, first of all, just a comment. I'm sorry that this process is more difficult than any human would expect. So, I see you as, you're in this business, you're performing work that people need, and you just want to get a building up so you can work inside. That seems to be the fundamental things of what's going on here. And because it's a building, it triggers a whole bunch of very complicated requirements, and I appreciate the way that you're addressing. You're bringing in the right experts to try to figure it out, and you're asking the right questions to proceed. So I really appreciate that. I would love to get a sense more about how the operation works in terms of, when people show up, and I guess my main questions would be, do customers come to that site to see your work and to evaluate it? And the other thing is it a sort of a single long shift operation, or are you working all night, or what's the general flow there? I was curious about that.
Okay, those are some good questions. We actually lease a building next door at up the street at Knox Trail. That's where all of our customer transactions are, our office staff. So this facility is strictly for employees only. As of right now, the shifts are just, well, currently we work outside, so that's the shifts, and I don't expect to change that. It's a very elite crew that does the work, and just like you and I, we need to work and we need to rest. In terms of the timing, Knox Trail is a one-way street. It's full of a lot of contractors. We're no different. Usually 6 to 7 in the morning is when a lot of employees or a lot of traffic on the road arise. When we talk about this trip generation, I mean, I can understand if I'm a Dunkin' Donuts or a Walgreens where you have a lot of vehicles. I mean, we have 6 or 7 large trucks that do the work. They might leave once or twice a day, and deliveries maybe 1 a day or 2 a day. So in terms of the actual traffic or what's currently going on the street, I mean, we're a manufacturing company, as I said. It takes a long time to build the product, so a lot of work inside that results in then a very finished product that goes out on a truck once a week. So we do all the work, very finished, a lot of finished work at our facility, which is the beauty of this, so that we can deliver something that looks like it took a very, very long time, which we've quietly done in this facility. But after days like today with high winds, it's a very tough trade to be out in the elements. So yes, I am excited about putting a building up. I've been on that street for a long time. I respect the process. We're contractors. I've got a civil engineering background as well. So I know you have to follow the steps, and we're doing our best to get this going.
Thanks. I think I had one question for you, I think.
Yes, sir.
About, one of the questions was about an old easement that's going off the side there. And I didn't study the map enough to understand it, but there is one old easement that could potentially provide access onto the WR Gray site. as an alternate entrance as compared to the, the one that's, off of High Street. And it's would be important, in my mind, to keep that open if possible, even though it's an old ancient easement. It does provide there's some difficulties there, but it does provide one possible way forward for some future development of W.R. Grace.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered about the status of it.
Yeah, so what I will do is I'll confer with the attorney representing Mr. Gunther about the status of that easement to make sure that either if it becomes a question about calculating, I don't know if you saw all the comments, but there was a comment about calculating our open space in our area, and some of those calculations, I wanted to make sure were either based or not based on including that area. So let me clarify it if that's okay, and make sure I get you the right answer, and then adjust accordingly as necessary.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess my last question was for, I guess I did have a question for planning staff. I didn't realize that. I'm sadly unfamiliar with the land disturbance permit process. Could you kind of remind me or tell me about, what's involved in that, and who is doing the permitting, and what's involved there?
Hey, Kristen, do you mind taking that one? I personally have actually not had a land disturbance permit.
Sure. So with the site plan special permit process, Chapter X is reviewed through that process. So where another permitting process is already taking place, those stormwater regulations are reviewed through it. So if this, for example, did not require a site plan special permit, then a land disturbance permit would be required. In this particular case, it's basically all folded into one. So the drainage and stormwater is being reviewed by GCG, the town's third-party engineer, for compliance, to help with streamline permitting, essentially.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion on the board's part? Hemingway.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few questions. One isn't a question, it's more so a comment regarding the Sidewalk Fund. So I understand that, you are self-funded. I fully appreciate that. But I do know that it is a goal of the select board and also the town manager to try to see if we can get more funding towards building more sidewalks across Acton. And so if that could be something that could be taken into consideration this week, and if you could come back at, a future meeting and then let us know if that's something you would be willing to do, and if so, how much you would be willing to contribute based on the finances on your side, that would be good. And then my actual question is, you did mention your water quality processes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about any hazardous pollutants that you currently have to filter out, treat, address, and if you could also go into if PFAS would be an issue with this.
You're aware of the location that we're at, correct? You're aware of our neighbor?
Yes.
So I went above and beyond to test our site, to clean our site. I couldn't buy the land because it was so toxic next door. Right. And I wanted to clear my name of that. Mm-hmm. So PFAS, any of the small issues that we're dealing with now, I'm stuck with for life next door because of Grace.
Yeah.
We don't, we use all organic and non-solvent cleaners on the trucks. Not much happens there. And all we're doing is concrete comes in, and we have wash basins on the way out, so a collection basin to let the concrete cure, dry, and then that's shipped off site with the rubble that we generate. It's all natural product. I mean, we're dealing with quarried stone, the New England field stone that's outside your building. So I feel like, and we can't drill a well because the groundwater below us is so polluted. So I don't know what else I can possibly do other than hopefully not be contaminated by the sites that are next to us already.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. Having W.R. Grace as your neighbor is not it's not ideal. But appreciate that. And also, you did mention adhering to DEP standards, and so appreciate that. Question about kind of the history of your operations. Where are you currently based right now?
So all the work is taking place on the current site, where the current building is supposed to be, where the
Okay.
proposed building is. So we're working outside in that space.
Great, thank you. And then my last question is, I apologize if I missed this in your presentation, but would sound be an issue?
I'm sorry, did you say sound?
Sound, yep.
The sound should be improved. Right now, the operation is outdoors, so any of the work that's being done is currently outdoors. They would do the assembly and a lot of the work interior to the building. I don't know if you've had any complaints or anything.
No, our neighbor's a loan manufacturer. There's loaders driving up and down the street. We're probably the quietest guys on the block.
Sounds good, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a commercial, setup.
Great, thanks. That's it for me.
Okay. Dean?
Yeah, just to follow up on a couple of the comments, specifically the sidewalk. Yeah, I agree that it doesn't make much sense to put in a 400-foot section of sidewalk in front of your property just to satisfy that condition. Although I expect you could probably do it cheaper than $50 a linear foot anyway. And I appreciate the situation you're in. But I do think it's important that we continue with our practice of getting contributions towards sidewalks. I know there's projects coming up on Route 62, Powder Mill Road for sidewalks. There's still some sections not yet complete on High Street, so certainly a contribution to the sidewalk fund of some sort would be appropriate. And secondly, I also agree with you about the trip generation. I mean, it's an industrial site. There's dump trucks and there's contractor vehicles back and forth constantly. This is such a small scale development that I think a narrative of your operation and count of your employees and that sort of thing would probably satisfy my curiosity anyway without having to hire a traffic engineer. That's it.
Okay, so if I can summarize.
Can I respond to Dean's comments?
Oh, please, go ahead.
Dean, I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm a local resident. I've got 2 kids. We use the sidewalks all the time. I understand that number is high. I'm going to look at it as if we could self-perform the work, and that's probably the number that I would be working with the town on. It would I would much rather give money to where it could be used versus us performing the work to satisfy the condition and no one ever using it, in my mind. So I think that's where we're going to be at. And then some of these other engineering requirements all starts eating away from the funds that could go to other spots. So when I hear about the trip generations, I understand the request. I think a narrative will help. But if we can save on those and put money towards sidewalk or try to get this facility up, is where I would like to be at.
So if I summarize what I've heard, let me just ask first if there is any public comment on this public hearing. If there is, please raise your electronic hand.
There's a hand up. It's right there.
Oh, yes.
Just a curiosity, your business sounds very interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. And I guess, are those walls structural?
Yeah, it's a fascinating product. We've had a lot of fun with it. They're completely structural. We've got wall panels that go from 2 feet high to 14 feet high, all with engineering components. And that's all we do. So everything is custom built. So every single project is unique to us or unique to the end user. And it's been a lot of fun.
I'm sorry, and is there any in town that we might drive by that you could point to us? Just obviously not for this proceeding, but just out of curiosity.
I know we just recently did one on Hill Road in Boxborough. We do a lot of projects. There's some residential ones in town. I don't know if I feel comfortable But I think in town,
There's also a beautiful website.
yeah, there's also a website, naturalstonewallsolutions.com. You can see all of our work. We did the work all at the Point over in Littleton on the way in for Anthony's Pizza. That's our wall in the front when you drive in. And yeah, beautiful website. I know there's work in town, but we've done a lot.
Thank you. So yeah, the project sounds really interesting to me as well. I'm sure it'll be a relief to be able to work inside, especially in the winter and the middle of the summer. So what I've heard is that the board would be willing to waive the sidewalk requirement in return for a donation. If you can work out an amount with the planning department. I didn't hear any comments about or concerns about the septic system beyond what the Board of Health and the Health Department would do. Is that correct? So we would accept the normal design from the Board of Health. Anything that the Board of Health approves, we would accept in the survey, in the site permit. And then I heard an acceptance that, the trip generation is probably not a requirement. Kayla and Kristen mentioned that they would consult with the peer review, but I think that's fine. And so I think some narrative of trip expectation is probably reasonable. I think, if you have a half a dozen employees here, that's not a huge, and it's not a customer site, that's a huge thing. Anything else the board would like them to address for next time?
No, just as you were saying, there's a whole bunch of technical issues raised both by the staff and by GCG. And, if you feel confident you can go ahead and, create plans and records that'll match those, that'll be really helpful.
We do.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable with making these requirements, making these, the larger items, conditions in the permit, rather than requiring that they be complete before we issue the permit.
So you're saying we could be done tonight, rather than continue the hearing?
I think I'd like to see the actual, the technical issues resolved first, because sometimes there's a small technical issue, and it turns out to be, a gigantic thing, and I'd like to get that settled.
So, sure, so I don't think we need to establish the conditions then tonight?
No.
We can just continue the hearing. And do you want them, I think you probably do want them to at least address legally the situation with the easement. So that, I heard really three things, assuming the septic system is fine. An informal trip generation, donation to the Sidewalk Fund, the technical things that Jim wants, plus the legal status of the easement.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, just a very quick clarifying question. You mentioned a peer review consultant. I'm not actually familiar with that. Can you go into a little bit more detail on that consultant and kind of what their findings were?
Sure. So I'm not familiar with them myself, but GCG Associates is a civil engineering and land surveying firm, which is what we're all doing. They draw a plan similar to how our firm does. And they review for technical proficiency to make sure all of the design and stormwater and all of the different plans match up to your regulations, both zoning and also from a stormwater standpoint. So they've done that. They provided us with that. They gave a summary, which I paraphrased earlier. And I don't see anything, at least in my humble opinion, I don't see anything that's insurmountable by any means. It's all really just crossing our T's and dotting our I's.
Okay. Lisa, is there a good date to continue the hearing to? And do you guys know, would you be ready in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks?
I would be ready in 2 weeks for sure. I don't see anything major. And really, the only item that I wasn't sure about would have been the septic system, but because you're okay with It sounded like, obviously a condition would be placed to say the septic system needs to conform with Title V and the Board of Health's approval. We would do that after the fact. That would allow us certainly to get these other items resolved within that period of time.
I've already had an informal conversation with the Board of Health, and the water consumption and the current septic there was no issues, and it just wasn't formally drawn up for tonight.
Right.
So we feel pretty comfortable with.
Yeah, unless the septic for the existing building was really old.
No,
And if you're not changing the number of employees on the site,
it was over-engineered, and we're on a sand pit, so the engineer was pretty happy with.
Well, we'll certainly confirm that and look into it.
So Lisa, we already have one public hearing next week. We could do it after. Oh, okay.
So, June 6th, 7 p.m. June 6th? Yes.
And that's okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would take a motion to continue the hearing until June 6th at 7:10 p.m.
We have town meeting next week, and then we have 3 public hearings on the 23rd.
Are those liquor license or are they site plans?
There's one that I know is a liquor license. I don't know about the other two.
We could fit that in there on the 23rd if the chair thinks so.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Yes, thank you.
And what time would it be then? Okay. So May 23rd at 7:40 is okay with you?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I would take a motion to continue the hearing until May 23rd at 7:40 p.m.
So moved.
So Fran moves, Dean second. If there's no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's okay, as long as you're not opposed. So
Thank you
very much.
Appreciate your time.
Okay, discuss town meeting article recommendations. There are 6 articles that we deferred from last time. We don't need to take any more public input for these. We just deferred them for particular reasons. The first ones we deferred are Articles 23 through 26. Mr. Manager, could you tell us where we stand with the labor negotiations?
Yes, so I am still working with our team to try to resolve all 4 of these contracts. We do, I'm pleased to report, have agreements on 2 of them. So for Article 23, which is dispatch, and Article 26, which covers police superior officers, we do have tentative agreements that we're prepared to ask town meeting to authorize in the first year. And then for the other 2, I would have to let you know the night of town meeting whether we've been able to settle those.
Okay. Can you give the board just a quick overview of those 2?
Yes,
So we can
absolutely. So these are 3-year contracts. Actually, dispatch was expired at the beginning of this current fiscal year. So that one is 3 years starting in FY22. The Superiors is 3 years starting in FY23. Both contracts provide the town with some language that we need to help with some issues that we're looking to address. In particular for dispatch, it's recruitment and retention that we're focused on. It's been a difficult job market, not in all positions, but particularly in the dispatch roles, has been difficult to fill those positions. And we provided compensation in those contracts that are competitive and consistent with other bargaining units. We wouldn't want to go into too much detail on that since we're still trying to finalize with the other groups, but I will be prepared to, or will be prepared to share any additional details we have at town meeting. Is there anything I missed?
Any questions for the manager on that?
Yeah, dispatch, with it becoming regionalized, does that change the, who's bargaining with who?
Yes, and that's actually on the agenda shortly, to
Okay.
an update on that project. But
Okay.
this contract understands that may happen in the middle of it.
Okay,
And
great.
both parties are okay with that.
Okay, so I'll take a motion on the first one, Article 23, authorized collective bargaining agreement for dispatch. Someone want to make a motion? Dean?
I'll move we recommend.
Motion to recommend, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of recommending Article 23, say aye.
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 Any opposed? So that's recommended unanimously.
And you're still okay with doing the presentation for that?
These are both consent.
Oh, great, that's right, okay.
I will be prepared to do that if one gets held. I also may, I'm planning to do a brief slide in the budget presentation, which was not in my recorded presentation because it wasn't ready. But I did mention it in the recorded presentation, but we didn't have a slide. So, and I'm going to skip 24 and 25, if that's okay with everybody, since we don't have any more information there. And I would take a motion on Article 26, authorize collective bargaining agreement, police superior officers.
So moved.
Motion to recommend?
Motion to recommend.
So, motion made to recommend, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
So Dean moves and Jim seconds. There's no more discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have three left. The two PCRC articles. The planning board voted to not recommend these two, but other than that, the planning department wrote up a little summary of the changes here. So that's the, new information from last time. If it's okay with everybody, if there's any discussion, I thought we could discuss them both together and then we would take an individual vote on them. Any comments?
Sure, a couple things. One is the DRB wrote us a memo in favor of this one. As I recall, I could be wrong. Dean, do you remember which? I know they wrote us a memo about one of these that we were going to be discussing.
I don't recall on these ones, no.
Okay, well, let me draw that comment back then, because I probably have it wrong. So I was thinking about this one. The town has made a number of changes to the PCRC bylaw over the years. There's always been this tension between the goals of the PCRC being either protecting land as open space or, reducing the number of units on the land. And you would think those would all sort of be the same thing, but the risk point that the planning department is pointing out is that if we make it so restrictive that there's so few units, then developers would choose to go ahead and do a conventional by right subdivision. We now have numbers from the planning department that match with, they're in line with the numbers we had from the proponents about how this change would impact the number of units that was allowed. It didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like a big change. It seemed like, yet another adjustment to the PCRC that, the town has been doing from time to time. I still think that even if it does pass, we'll probably still want to continue the process of looking from a bigger point of view at our whole develop subdivision bylaws and, how they fit into a world where we're re-emphasizing sustainability. But I think this is a safe one to either endorse or make no recommendation on. I don't feel like we need to recommend against it.
Anyone else? Dean?
So I would recommend against it. I think that the planning board really has this as part of their expertise. And the fact that they're recommending against it, I think really is important to me. I think it tends to be a very complicated technically issue. It also can get very emotional. And I think it's just rush to judgment that I just don't think is a good idea. I think if we want to talk about this in a calm and rational fashion in isolation. I think that's something that maybe the planning board and planning department should talk about. Looking at, for instance, one of the newest developments on Genevieve Lane off Newtown Road, yeah, it looks like pretty intense development from the front, but then when you look at the plan, it shows the amount of land that that will be protected in perpetuity. I think that's really important. I think there have been a number of other PCRC type developments that have yielded a great deal of land to the town. And we all know that the cost of land is going up and we're not going to be able to buy it all. So I think some of these schemes that we've come up with are probably good ways to keep some of that land from being developed. So I would recommend against it.
Other comments from Fran or Hemingway?
I have no comments at this time.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm still toggling between it. I was wondering if anyone could, or if anyone had some insight into why the planning board decided to vote against it.
So we're not taking comment on these, just like we didn't take comment on the, when we were doing our recommendations before, just for the person who has their hand up. Yeah, I find their discussion a bit confusing, so I can't say exactly. I did watch a bit of it after the fact, so for me, I just went by the memo that the planning department produced on what the effects would be. I have to say that I agree with Dean here for two reasons. One is, this didn't follow the normal process and therefore is not well vetted. And in fact, the person who submitted the two alternative, really, articles, well, the fact that two were submitted shows confusion around the issue and about how to implement even the desire of these two articles. So I think that's pretty confused. And kind of as Jim alluded to, I'm really concerned about unintended consequences here because they weren't vetted, right? It's pretty, I wouldn't say it's easy. I was going to say it's easy, but they're very clever now in how they lay out subdivision lots, right? So they can put subdivision lot sharing part of the wetlands in each lot and get, the full coverage. And what happens there is we get, one house per acre kind of arrangement. And I think we're driving people towards normal subdivisions. I don't think that's what we want. And even if what's preserved is wetlands, I don't see a problem with that, right? That's a wooded swamp or, a pond, I have no problem with that being restricted in development in perpetuity, right? So, and I think that having the houses closer together rather than having the sprawl is also better. So I like the PCRC law, and I don't think we should lessen it myself. So any final comments? Okay, I would take a motion. Why don't we do them one at a time? Article 42, amend zoning bylaw, PCRC 9.6.2.3, number of dwelling units, version 1.
I move that we not recommend.
Okay, motion to not recommend. Is there a second? I'll second. All in favor of not recommending Article 42, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay. I'm going to abstain.
I'm abstain too.
Then Dean's motion passes. So we are not recommending Article 42. Article 43, amend zoning bylaw PCRC 9.6.2.3, number of dwelling units, version 2. Is there a motion?
I would move that we not recommend.
Is there a second? I'll second.
I would love to have a little discussion of this before we vote.
Oh, please go ahead.
Especially if, right now my name's next to there, so I'm going to need to stand up and represent the collective thoughts of the board. So it'd be great to hear anything more that Imogen or Fran want to say about this rather than abstain. If there's anything additional that they want to make sure gets represented.
Yeah, so for me, I guess I would like more information about, well, we can't take public comment, so understand why we may not be able to hear from like members of the planning board, but I'm wondering, so I know that Kristen sent us a few notes that the town manager forwarded. I'm wondering if we could hear maybe from town staff or, just to kind of get more context as to, because I think I'm in favor for the theory of it, but I also understand that like implementing it may have some unforeseen consequences, and so kind of understanding more of the nuance behind that from like a town staff perspective, I think would be helpful for me to like move out of an abstain vote.
John, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Sure, thank you. Well, staff does not support these changes as presented in the 2 citizen petitions. I think there are several reasons for that. One is that it appears that it would steer people more towards standard subdivisions, which, as mentioned, can creatively use more of the land, if not all of the land, and I think would be counter to what was envisioned when the PCRC bylaw was created through a vast amount of public input and commentary. And even changes that have occurred in the last several years, I believe, followed similar paths. And generally, if there's a change that the select board or the planning board or the community wants to implement to a bylaw like this, it would be recommended that some sort of formal community engagement process be undertaken rather than a citizen petition, which is a good way of getting an issue understood and recognized and awareness of an issue, but it's not always the best way to get public input and comment on a particular issue because, there's not many opportunities. You can go to the planning board hearing, you can come to our meeting here a few times, but other than that, there's not a lot of back and forth about why this is being proposed and what it would do. We did start to try to analyze it, but we certainly would benefit from some more time to look at how changes like this would impact the existing bylaws, how would it impact the parcels out there that we know are out there that are greater than 8 acres. This could have an impact on those that we haven't really talked about. So that's sort of the general sense is that we're always open to adjusting our bylaws, and that's a key thing that we do here every year. The planning board's charged with working on that, and staff is always eager to improve bylaws. But I think that this one we would want to think more about and study more before we recommend.
Got you. And then based on that, and I know, Jim, since your name is here, you've probably looked into this yourself. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on this, like on potentially, like, since it is a citizen's petition, has there been already that type of community engagement around this, or do you know about that?
There's been some outreach by the proponent to individual boards, but there hasn't been, the PCRC bylaw is so complex. It needs, there hasn't been recently a public meeting where people have gone through the different aspects of the bylaw and explained it. Because I knew I'd be addressing the article, I got to sit down with Kristen, and she went through the different parts of the law and how the wetlands get calculated, and I retained some of it, really, but it's complex. I got far enough in it to feel like that if this particular thing passes, it's not going to be the big scary thing that is being discussed. It's just going to be a slight reduction. But I totally get I agree that it would be much better if there was, if we, as the board, said, yeah, we'd like to look at these issues, and we, work through John to get the staff working on it, and we, ask the planning board to consider this as well. I think there could be a real, an actual planning process that would include this as an element. That would be great.
Would that involve a new master plan, or how would that?
No,
start?
there's often looks at particular bylaws. I mean, there's if we made a goal to, take a deeper look at what, I have some hesitancy about this phrase, but there is a phrase that's commonly used, sustainable development. Maybe it's an oxymoron, I don't know, but it's a phrase in the planning community. And if we took time to, with public engagement and public education to understand what that meant to people, then from that could flow some helpful changes to the PCRC bylaw and our other bylaws. Dean.
Yeah, we've been focusing a lot on, the parcels of land that we protect, but some of the other ideas that came out of the whole PCRC, and this goes back 25 or 30 years, some of the particular environmental benefits to cluster development, which is what we're talking about. Your roads are shorter. Your utility infrastructure is shorter. Okay, so your roads are shorter, so that means you've disturbed less territory. You've dug up less land. You've created fewer problems for your wildlife and for the migration of groundwater. Your roads will be shorter forever, which means you don't have the heat island effect of that much additional pavement, nor do you have to plow and maintain it. Whether it's plowed and maintained by the town or by a private developer. You don't have, asphalt eventually breaks down and it's off-gassing VOCs constantly. So you've eliminated a lot of that. Your utility infrastructure, whether it's above ground or below ground, all of those lines are shorter. So there's less use of resources in order to build those roadways. By clustering the houses closer together, presumably the maintained and landscaped portions of the yards are smaller. We don't have any way of controlling on a private individual lot how much you want to have in lawn and how much you're treating with fertilizer and pesticides constantly. If you make the lots smaller, presumably there will be less opportunity for that. If somebody has a bigger lot because they've got the additional land, how are you going to police the maintenance of, how much lawn and landscape infrastructure are they going to be maintaining, and what's the environmental impact of that? So all of these things, I think, have some very long-term impact on environmental issues that I think we should be concerned with. We've been talking a lot about, energy conservation, and this certainly, it takes a certain amount of energy to produce a ton of asphalt. So all of those things are made smaller. By having a shorter road, not only can it be shorter, but probably can be narrower because you're not so likely to have two-way traffic there. So you've not only shrunk the length of the road, but the width of the road. So everything is smaller and more compact and less energy intensive, not only for construction, but also for long-term maintenance and operations. So I think these are all important things. And finally, although it's hard to imagine one of these PCRCs being affordable, having smaller utility infrastructure and roadway infrastructure certainly reduces the cost to the developer. So there might be an opportunity for a developer not to increase the price of the unit as high as they could be, or as high as they would have to be if they had to put in a mile of roadway, if you can get away with a half a mile of roadway. So I think those are all the kind of issues and the benefits that I think you get with a PCRC, or any kind of a cluster development, and these were things that were debated on years ago when we first established this. And I think now, when we're talking about climate issues, it's even more imperative that we look at that sort of thing rather than just, let's go back to the conventional subdivisions, which people in our planning staff and planning board 25 years ago said that that's not sustainable. So why suddenly somebody's proposing something that's going to be less sustainable and something that we pretty much tried to move away from 25 years ago? I just don't understand that. Off my soapbox.
Thank you. No, I think that was very helpful. So any other comments before we vote? And to me, some of the things that we've discussed here tonight, that's the ramification of not going through the normal process, right? Because these all would have been aired if we went through the normal process. And to me, that's a very different thing from the one we're going to be discussing next, which is a suggestion for us to do something. This is actually a change to the bylaw, right? A non-binding resolution is very different than a change to the bylaw. And so the change to the bylaw needs to be better.
This for a second.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Steal your warrant. I know this is the draft.
Do you want to look that up before I call
I
for
do.
the vote?
Do you
Yeah, that's fine.
Where it's 40, it's.
Well, this is 44, no, 43.
I feel like it's going to come up again,
And that's,
whether we tackle it now or.
so that,
yeah.
one of the things that we can choose to do, if we're interested in doing that, is one of us can propose it as a goal for next year to in whatever wording we want, to examine the PCRC bylaw, to do whatever we want to do, So if there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote on the motion to not recommend Article 43. All in favor of not recommending, say aye.
Aye.
I also say aye.
Aye.
Also 3 ayes. And then all opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that one passes 3-2. So we voted to not recommend by a count of 3-2. Okay, the last one is Article 54, the non-binding resolution to have some kind of tree clearing limits, and the petitioner goes through a couple of different possibilities there. Actually, I forget what the planning board did here. But any comments or discussion?
Sure. This is the one where the DRB wrote us a letter about, in support of it. The DRB members in attendance unanimously agreed to support the article, and they attached a letter of support.
Okay. So to me, this one really can't have unintended consequences since it's not a law, right? But it, I think here the petitioner did set up several possibilities for controlling tree clearing, requiring a buffer on the outside of a parcel. Some towns actually inventory every tree on a parcel, and then there's a percentage thing. There are a number of ways to approach it, and the petitioner outlined a few. 2 or 3, I forget. So, any other discussion? If there's none, someone want to make a motion?
I vote that we recommend this article.
Is there a second?
A second.
So Jim moves to recommend, and Fran seconds. All in favor of recommending Article 54, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
So I'm going to vote aye, so that's 4-0 to 1. So, so we're recommending that. Mr. Manager, do you have anything else on town meeting that we need to discuss tonight?
No, just a reminder that it's on, and the clickers are back. And anything else, Mark? Moderators meeting this week, Wednesday, just to finalize presentations and layout.
Just notice for...
Oh, before we move on, I was wondering if we could talk about one of the warrant articles again, but you can finish first.
Okay. I just wanted to say that sometimes the board meets before town meeting if there's some last minute thing to consider. So please be prepared for me to call a meeting at like 6 o'clock. It would be actually in the high school. They give us a classroom or a staff room or something to have the meeting in. So I'll call one if, one needs to be, if there's some last minute thing we need to, think about before town meeting.
Sorry. After image, I had something to review with the
But
board.
images might be long. Is yours short?
Mine's longish.
Okay, we'll do images first.
We actually might be talking about the same thing maybe, but I know that RAC sent us a note about approving or recommending article, where is it?
53, the one about
53,
protecting
right?
Acton's potable
Acton's
water.
potable water. So I was wondering if we wanted to revisit that, because we have that as, we currently have that as no recommendation from the select board. So just want to pitch that.
Okay, do people want to think about changing the recommendation there?
As I remember the conversation, we were split on it, so that no recommendation seemed like a reasonable way to represent the will of the board, but happy to talk about it more.
Do you want to make your case one way or the other? So why don't we go from there and then...
Sure, yeah. So based on what I had heard, so I wasn't able to attend that RAC meeting myself personally, but from what I had heard afterwards, RAC had a discussion about the importance of, codifying, our commitment to protecting our potable water. And this is a non-binding resolution, but it would essentially create a framework for us to, move forth with having that as a clear understanding that that is something that we intend to do for future projects. But, happy to hear what other people think as well. If we want to keep it as no recommendation, I think that's fine from like a neutral standpoint, but from what RAC had said and from what they had read through, they were generally in support of it from, also just thinking about our commitment to sustainability, so.
Oh, Dean, please go ahead.
Yeah, frankly, I'd be more comfortable with keeping it with no recommendation because I'm a little suspicious of the wording here that certainly protecting Acton's potable water is really important. But I'm afraid that, the second part of that sentence would get used as a way to stop any possible development in town. Talking about promoting/encouraging, they don't want to promote or encourage additional water uses. Is that going to be used to try to stop any commercial development in town? Because obviously they're going to use water. Is that wording going to be used against us to stop any affordable housing development? Because obviously the people there are going to use water. So I think this is it's very suspicious to me, and I think that it can be, the use of the phraseology could be certainly used against us, and, anybody that wants to oppose anything that is going to be done in the future, they're going to point to this and say, well, see, you passed this resolution saying that we don't want to promote or encourage additional water uses. So therefore, no new development, no new affordable housing, no new schools. Anything that somebody wants to stop, they're going to point to this and say, town meeting, and more importantly, the Board of Selectmen agreed that we want to stop any additional water use. And I think it's a Trojan horse. And I would be more in favor of recommending against this, but I would be satisfied with the no recommendation that we've got right now.
I'll comment. I completely agree with Dean. Who's going to vote against clean water? But the thing is that discouraging water use doesn't improve our water quality, right? We don't have a water quantity problem. We have a PFAS problem, but cutting down on the amount of water we pump doesn't fix well, we can't cut down on it, but not increasing it doesn't fix it. And there are other things that we're doing that do address the PFAS problem. So it's really, saying, are you guys in favor of mother and apple pie, and rather than encouraging additional water use? Of course, people are going to vote for that. But I completely agree with Dean that it's a Trojan horse, and it's trying to get people to vote for a false choice. And I think it's borderline, it's deceptive, right? Which I don't like.
I can chime in very fast. So just kind of based on what I'm hearing, it seems like maybe no recommendation is the way to go. But I will say, just from what I have read and also spoke to people about, because this is a non-binding resolution, technically it is more so a recommendation at best. There's nothing legally binding about this. So I think that from a perspective of encouraging water conservation, which is something that is a best practice, it's not a absolute no for development, but it's a framework through which we can develop smarter. I think that, it's an important step forward, but, I think that, that's why we have a diverse board. And I think that maybe a no recommendation then is the best way to keep it, just kind of based on, the varying perspectives on this. But just wanted to pitch in that perspective that had come up.
So just so everybody knows, we've actually decreased our water use, right? So we used to pump in the, 1.7 something gallons per day, and now we're down to like 1.5 something, right? So we have decreased our water use, and we didn't have to prevent adding new water users to do that. So is everybody content with leaving it as is? Okay, I'm seeing nods around. I'll take a motion if someone wants to make a motion, but I'm not seeing that. And then Jim, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So I'm going to be speaking to some of the articles where there were split votes, and I wanted to just say out loud some of the main points I was going to say, so that people could react and see if I really captured things okay. Would that be okay, Mr. Chair?
Mm-hmm. Yes, please go ahead.
Let's see. In terms of the elected planning board members, we were split. We agreed to make no recommendation. We'll hear the various pros and cons during the discussion. If any of us thinks an important point is being missed, we may speak as individuals on this issue during the debate. So without getting into the pros and cons, I just said I'd mention it. I didn't have my microphone on, so those of you at home might not have heard anything I just said. I'm sorry. Basically what I said was we're split. You'll hear the various pros and cons in the discussion, and if we think an important point is being missed, we may speak up as individuals during the debate. It's okay? Okay. I think I drafted something about PCRC changes, but I think we basically said all this out loud. I think I'm fine with, I don't think I need to review that with the group. Basically, you know, we're comfortable with the goal, we're not comfortable with the details, since it didn't go through in a big public process. And there's a bunch of bigger issues here involved here. In terms of the zoning map for 32 Weatherby Street, we voted in favor of it. The main concern that we heard was about, you know, how are we going to rely on the word of the proponent that they won't, you know, put in a whole bunch of housing. And what I said was, well, our thought was, well, the person's lived here for, you know, they've been a long time part of the community, and they're not going to risk their whole reputation with the town. And second of all, they have a rational business reason to not have housing there. They want to have an extension of their office of the Onyx Corporation right there. So it seemed like both from a reputation point of view and a just plain common sense point of view that they wouldn't be putting up a bunch of houses. I think that's it. The other ones were all much more straightforward.
Okay, anything else before we move on from town meeting stuff?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Next thing is update on ARPA projects, Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly mention where we are with the ARPA investments that were approved by the board in October and then revised later in 2021. And generally, I just wanted to mention that there were projects that the board approved for FY22 and projects that were approved for FY23. And many of the ones in FY22 have not been completed, and they will not be completed in 22. And we were not considering this a funding that ended. We were just considering that it carries forward. So if there's any confusion from the board, let me know if that's not the way you see it too. So looks like we've allocated close to, or we've pulled POs, or we've put work together towards about 1.4 million of the funding so far. The town revenue replacement, that was one of the first things that we did. Sustainability initiatives, we've been using some of that funding to do several different things. We're developing a program right now for grants for businesses to do energy efficiency improvements. It's still in development, but it's being created. We contributed ARPA funding to help with the acquisition of a new Mach-E all-electric police cruiser, which we premiered at Arbor Day, but had to go back to the shop for a windshield recall. And we will officially debut it soon, but that's exciting. Gardner Field, if you've driven by or walked by that lately, you'll see the playground equipment that's out there and all the work that's gone on there. That's an ARPA project that we're excited to see happening. So COVID mitigation measures, that's something that we've been doing all along. Administrative costs, the Great Road feasibility work, looking at wastewater solutions. That project, we issued an RFP, and now we're working on selecting a vendor to award that contract to, so it's all moving forward. The subrecipients at the school district and the water district, we're working through some paperwork on those, but I think we're on the same page. And we're working with the NAGOG treatment entity to do the paperwork that's needed for that. And it's all going pretty well. I think there are some things that we know when the board looks at this again this summer, we'll say, yeah, we asked for X, but it looks like we're really going to need X plus this, or in some cases, X minus this. So I think I look forward to that discussion. And I think, you know, if the board intends on having it in June or July, I think this update will be more substantive at that time. I just wanted to give you kind of a preview. And I guess the other thing to mention is that there's been no issues, no problems as of yet. So.
Any questions for the manager on that?
Just a very quick one. So I think we mentioned maybe revisiting or just like kind of like reconfirming like our ARPA allocations for like this next fiscal year sometime in June, right? Just to...
Or sometime this summer.
Or sometime this summer, right. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, we'll move on to sewer commissioner items. So we'll start working as sewer commissioners here. We have 3 items. The first and third things require a decision on our part, and so we'll take public input for those. The middle one is just a status item, and we won't take public input on that. So, Mr. Manager, first the update on the AHA sewer connection using a MassWorks grant.
Thank you. So through a housing choice grant that we received last year, we started design on connecting the new housing authority project on Main Street to sewer. We presented the results of that. Chin Ray Pang, our town engineer, is leading that project. She is here to provide an update on exactly where we are with that. But the board did review the feasibility study, which I believe is in the packet, and authorize us moving forward with design to try to further sort out exactly what this would cost and then what this would look like and how it may be implemented. And so after Chin gives a brief update on the status of that project, I also wanted to talk with the board about the MassWorks grant application that we are working on to support that effort and how it relates to a MassWorks grant application that the Housing Authority is working on themselves, and the potential for us to combine into a single to make it more competitive. And Kelly Cronin from the Housing Authority, I believe, is here for that portion. So if Chin Ray, if you could provide an update, please.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So as John mentioned, you'll know a little history about the housing choice grant and the feasibility study that was done last year. So I'm just here to provide some updates on the design project that's currently going on. So I've been working closely with GPI on the sewer extension crossing Route 2 to the AHA project, a future AHA project. So right now they are about 60% done with their preliminary design, and the piping size calculation and the pump has been selected and the calculation has been complete. So they're working on the plans and the record drawings and just technical specifications about the design. And so we should be expecting a 90% design done in about a month. As for the next step, they will be looking for working on traffic mitigation plans for construction, as well as going through DOT and also town for preliminary design review, and also some quality control with the town and the, of course, Mass DOT with the Route 2 crossing. They did anticipate a little bit of delay because of the weather with the soil blowing and the fact that parallel to Route 2, there's a high pressure gas main. So they need to kind of do instead of being soil boring, they did some kind of a radar detection and to study more about the exact location of the gas main to make sure that during construction, we can stay away from that. So that's why we anticipate a delay. But again, we should be expecting a 90% design that's going to be submitted to us for review, as well as Mass DOT in about a month, if not a month and a half. And after that, we're going to be going, after the comments and all that, we're hoping to go in front of CONSCOM in September, October. And that will be, that will kind of complete the design process. And then, of course, we'll be moving on to hopefully getting funding and construction. So that's all I have right now. Thank you. Yeah.
I have two questions. How do we decide whether to go under Route 2 or under the bridge, attached to the bottom of the bridge? Because the plan list both has alternatives.
Oh yeah, no. So last meeting, because I didn't receive anything from a GPI regarding the current status of design. That's why I was only able to provide the feasibility study that was presented to you late last year. So I guess the easier we decided the board voted to decide to go with the directional drill is it will make the permit processing a little bit easier because to study whether we tag to the Route 2 bridge would require a structural engineering analysis and check the status of the condition of the current bridge. So that would further kind of complicate the process. That's why. And then either way it would require a pump just because of the grade change. So it's not really a one way or another will be easier. The pump will be required in either option. But a directional drill just also would have a less impact on traffic and doing construction. So right now they are designing the sewer extension with a directional drill option.
Thank you. And the only other question I have, and I know the answer here because I chatted with you, or at least I think I know the answer. This line will have future capacity for hooking up the public safety facility, very likely, but not much else, right?
Correct. We were looking at the design and capacity analysis. And so right now the design is the pump station is going to be on the parcel that's kind of next to Route 2. And then from there is is gravity main from we can connect public safety facility. And then to that pump station, the gravity main is sized to take like accordingly. I think we would have enough capacity to connect PSF, and also the one a residential house across the street from the AHA project, and from there it's going to be a low pressure, a pressurized sewer pump going under Route 2 to connect to the last manhole that terminated in Kelly's Corner. So I know the board also kind of looked into so basically it's sized for the gravity portion to connect the PSF. And if the capacity issue is the issue is with the pump station, because we can't oversize the pump station because again pressurized pump station. So when you what's that word called? When you supersize a pressurized main, it creates an issue where you wouldn't have enough pressure to push the sewer underneath Route 2 to get to. So it's you would generate more of a clogging issue. So right now we're really looking at the PSF and the one single family home, and also the new housing authority project.
Great, thank you.
But just to clarify, we're not designing a project that would implement those connections. We're just designing a project that potentially could accommodate them someday.
Yes.
Yes. Right now, the project is really just to accommodate the housing project, and with the option that we're not looking at that right now. The gravity main would be okay, but.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions for Chin before we bring in Kelly? So can we allow Kelly to speak? Well, after Kelly speaks, I will take public input.
Okay. We were going to talk with Kelly about the MassWorks grant, which we haven't gotten to yet. But we can.
Okay.
Kelly.
So do you want to talk first about? I think we should cover all the pieces of this because it's important for people to know before they ask questions. So. Do you want to talk about the town's MassWorks grant first, and then Kelly can talk about hers, or how do you want to?
Yeah, Kelly can be here for that and jump right in. Thank you. So we participated in the Commonwealth one-stop program where we talked to them about a handful of things that we think might be coming down the line, and then we talked to them about it, and they gave us feedback. And one of the things that we mentioned was this project, and one of the things that they mentioned is that it may be beneficial to work with the housing authority to have a single application rather than two separate ones for the same project. And just to clarify exactly what our application would include, it would be the cost, which, Chin, I believe we're saying it's 1.5 million or so.
Yeah, correct. That was the preliminary cost estimate.
The cost to implement this design that Jen was just talking about, and any sort of related costs associated with that. That would be the scope of our MassWorks grant. And that is to support, and the MassWorks program is to support development. It doesn't work unless you're supporting a private development, like the one we received in Powder Mill was because that was supporting a private apartment complex, the part of the 40B. In this case, the Housing Authority's project is considered private for the way that MassWorks looks at things, because it's privately financed, even though it's ultimately going to be a public facility. And so, Kelly, I guess if this would be a good time for you to talk about what you were thinking about for a MassWorks grant and where we may be able to collaborate.
So we also submitted an expression of interest for our project because you can use the money for infrastructure. So we had submitted an application to do the clearing of the land, taking out the old septic that's part of the landscaping property now, doing utility connections for water, electric, demolition of the building that's there, doing a basic, did I lose you guys?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. All of a sudden I saw a blank picture. So we submitted an expression of interest, and after that they did a debrief with us, the folks at EOHCD, or I'm going to get the initials wrong. And they said that if there's two applications from the same town, they compete against each other instead of complement each other. So they had suggested that we do a single application, the sewer and the infrastructure. We're asking for 1.5, but we can scale our application back. Our housing consultant thinks that the sewer would be such a benefit to the cost of our project that we could scale back our 1.5 to a lower amount if we did a joint application.
Great. Any questions from the board for Kelly? Okay, I'll open it up to questions from the public. First in the room. Welcome.
Thanks. Alyssa Nickel. This is probably from your previous petitioner. So I'm pretty concerned about the first part of this project, the sewer connection, not the housing authority infrastructure. Primarily because there are 41 units, all affordable, so I'm in full support of the Main Street project. I've been very vocal about that support. Because there's not currently enough capacity for 282 parcels in the existing sewer district, so we're talking about adding another 41 units. I know during the Arpa discussion, Acton Medical expressed interest in hooking up to sewer. Maybe there's not capacity, or maybe there is. And now we're also talking about possibly the public safety facility in the future. So I'm wondering how much our police department budget is going to have to increase in order to pay the sewer fees as opposed to lower septic fees. Because my monthly sewer fees are about 6 times the cost that it would be for us to pump sewer, to pump septic if we had a septic at my house. So I know that there was an analysis done between the cost for the Acton Housing Authority of sewer versus septic, and while it sounds like it, and it appears that it would be less expensive because they wouldn't have to pay for the construction of the septic, over the life of the building, I'm concerned that it would actually be more expensive for them to hook up to sewer, because they would, if they hooked up to septic, built a septic system, they would pay that mortgage off in 30 years, and then let's say that the residences can continue to house a low-income families for 30 more years, 60 years, then the annual cost of septic is $4,000, according to the consultant. Maybe it lasts 80 years. So you're looking at, $1 million for septic over that life of the building versus $1.5 million for sewer. So yes, they don't have to pay upfront the sewer, but somebody's paying for it. We've already paid $1.8 million for this property. CPC money gave $1 million. ACHC gave $150,000. And now, the state money, the MassWorks grant for the sewer feasibility study and the design, that's more money. So I don't really want another $1.5 million of state money going to this unnecessary sewer project because this was permitted with a septic design. We've already spent legal fees to get rights to cross over Isaac Davis Way. The septic was designed and then it was redesigned to accommodate the dog park. So I'm really concerned about this and I hope that you don't approve it. Thanks.
Thank you. Justin, can you call on the online people with their hands raised?
Yes, we have Claire Siska.
Hi, just two simple questions. I wondered, when Chin said that the pump station would be on the property closest to Route 2, am I correct in assuming that would be 348 Main Street? And we are entering our design phase, so it adds another little complication. I think that pump stations aren't that big, and so I just want to know when, that a visual of where that pump station would be is going to be available so that we can incorporate it into our design. And my second question was in terms of the grants that you're looking at, do we have a time frame on when you would get an answer to whether or not we got the grants?
I'll do the second one first, Mr. Manager. Or Kelly, what's the time frame for MassWorks grant?
I think they're due the first week of June, and we probably would hear back by mid to late summer. I don't know if Kelly has a better answer.
No, I think by September, we're hoping. The other thing I just want to add, since Claire spoke about the dog park, is that the septic system, the dog park committee would love to not have that there. I think it would make a better use of the property if you didn't have the septic system there too. So just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah. And Claire, Chin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this pump station is underground, and so it'll have a grate at the surface.
I might have to verify that information. I know part of the pump is going to be underground, but I do believe it is going to be a small structure above ground, but it's nothing it's not any in big scale of a pump station that you would see. Like sometimes you can drive by, you won't even notice it's actually a pump station. I'm pretty sure it's a small scale one.
Okay, it's just the location of it.
Yes. So once
coordinated.
Right, I understand where you come from, Claire. So once I have the 90% design plan, I can definitely share that with you to work with the dog park committee on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
And we have a call-in user 2.
Hi, yes, this is Tara from West Acton, and I agree with what Alyssa says, and I want to express kind of ongoing concern about the lack of an oversight committee for sewer finance. I know the select board acts as the sewer commissioner, but there's no rigorous financial analysis in the public view. These comes as an agenda item, and they're quickly passed over, in a sense, the actual financial analysis. And so Alyssa does a lot of this work, and it's really helpful. And I'm listening to other people who have been looking at this project and there is concern growing about the ongoing finances, because yes, it might be cheaper for the developer, the original CapEx costs, but on an operating expense level, where else is the money going to come from, except for a town meeting? And so having this plan vetted by the FinCom and vetted by people in the public, I think is an important thing to do. I would urge the select board to table this until that happens. I also feel like this concept of giving away the capacity of the sewer and leaving the town liable to property owners that are in the sewer district to get the capacity at a later date is an ongoing problem where the select board appears to be managing land use by project, by exception. So one by one, the capacity is getting whittled away and the liability of the town is increasing. And there doesn't seem to be anybody, at least in the public, that I can find, certainly I haven't heard this in the FinCom meetings, that is looking at this liability and looking at the costs and the scenarios relative to what's going on. So free money from MassWorks to promote development isn't always free. It often comes with a very high future cost. And so just like we're saying climate change, there's maybe a little cost now, but a much higher cost later. It's the same thing here. So I urge the town to look more carefully at this and to get some FinCom eyes on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any comments or discussion from the board? Jim?
So I wanted to just thank Kelly for spending some time with me on the phone this afternoon so I could get some questions answered. And so the way I've ended up seeing this so far is that the septic system route for the Main Street project is more expensive. On the other hand, it's very well known. There's, we understand where it would go, what it would look like, what it would cost. There's no huge permitting barriers. It's yet another leach field. There's a certain safety in that, although it's more expensive. The sewer project, on the other hand, does end up saving saving money on the housing project, which I think is a good thing. But it has more unknowns. It has permitting unknowns. It has technical unknowns. And it has, of course, we have to actually get the MassWorks grant. I leave that to, I'm very happy to listen to Kelly's analysis of what works best for the housing development. A previous concern I had was that this sewer project was a sort of a Trojan horse for, sewering up Main Street or, sewering all the way up and getting Great Road involved and all that. And I'm very reassured hearing about the design here that, when you have a force main system like that, you can't supersize it. It's got a little bit of extra capacity to maybe handle the public safety facility, but it's not some, gigantic straw that's then going to allow us to spend, a lot more money in the wastewater treatment plant to expand the capacity and then get, everybody else paying lots of money for sewers. So that's reassuring to me. In terms of the dog park, so what I saw on the plans, Claire, you were asking, I sent the preliminary, the feasibility information to Tom, as chair of the dog park committee, and it looked like a 10 by 10 fenced in area that was relatively close to Main Street, but not directly on the Main Street sidewalk, like offset by 20 or 30 feet. So that's the kind of object you'd be. So there would be a challenge there. And of course, there's also a challenge if you have the septic system. They both create different kinds of design challenges for the dog park. So I don't know what to say there. As I recall, I was outvoted on this whole question of spending a lot of money on getting the sewer done. So I'm a little reassured by the fact that we might get MassWorks money to do this. I think that's a much better use of money than to spend our ARPA money on. Thanks.
Other comments? Dean?
Yeah, first off, as far as, eventually tying in the public safety facility, that building does not actually have a huge septic demand to begin with. And the existing leach field was built just under 20 years ago. It was super well designed. I think it's going to be way down the road before we have to do that. I would think the only reason you'd end up having to go to sewers there is if you decided, you wanted a major expansion of the existing building and you needed to actually build something where the septic system is now. So I don't foresee that it's going to happen anytime soon, certainly not in my lifetime, hopefully not in Himage's lifetime, that we have to even think about that. I'm still in favor of going ahead with the MassWorks grant. I think, yeah, as Alyssa has put forward, we have put a lot of money into the Housing Authority project, and I expect we will. I think it's something that's a needed piece of infrastructure. The town has made all kinds of talk about how we want to support people with limited means, and we have to put our money where our mouth is. So I think, considering that it will, if we are allowed to do this sewer connection, especially even better if we can do it with a MassWorks grant and alleviate some of the high costs for the Housing Authority, I think that's perfectly in keeping with my personal goals.
Image?
Yeah, I have a question. So, just taking a look at the documents, I was wondering if you could elaborate more, because it seems that the MassWorks grant could do more than just the sewer connection, right? Is that what I'm reading correctly? Okay. I was wondering if you could go into a few more details about that, and like, if so, how much of that would actually go towards sewer and how much of it would go towards all these other projects?
So if we did a joint application, the priority from our perspective would be the sewer, because that takes a big cost off of the Housing Authority's capital costs for the construction. And we would also include getting the site, meaning where Kennedy Landscaping is, ready for housing. So we take the building down, take out the old septic, do the site work that's needed there. We're going to apply for a lot, and because they've told us that they can scale it back, it won't hurt our application. So we are going to apply for the grading and the leveling for the building footprint, for doing curbing and sidewalk, if that works with the town's plans, or setting for the street that they want to do on Main Street. The hydrants, installing the hydrants, relocating drainage, because the town wanted us to relocate where the drainage was there on the entrance, and doing some just get that old septic out and grade the whole site, and maybe even do the first level for the driveway with utility lines. So you can use it for infrastructure, and they do prioritize infrastructure connected to housing. That's one of the priorities of the MassWorks grant.
Got you. Thanks. No, that's helpful. So I think for me, so the application is due in June, which means there isn't much time if we did want to go ahead with putting forth the grant to actually go forth and do that. But I would be, if possible, I would love to see if we could pass this by FinCom and see what their recommendation would be. So that's kind of my stance on it, but I don't know what their meeting cadence is, when their next meeting is. Would that be enough time if they did recommend this for it to potentially go back to us, or if staff could take it from there? But something to think about.
So I just will comment there. The proposal here is to cover this project from grants, so there's no construction cost to the town, and there's no operational cost to the town because the sewer fees are paid for by the AHA. And Kelly is in favor of this project. So there really isn't very much for FinCom to consider here.
Right. So, but my question is pertaining to some of the comments that were mentioned about potentially if we did go forth and authorize the sewer connection, could that potentially lead to more costs in the future versus like if we went forth with the septic system? So I guess that's kind of where I'm at in terms of financially, what does that look like in the future?
So there is the question of using capacity, right? And that we're going to be covering under the third bullet here today. Do we want to, how do we want to proceed here? Are we ready to vote tonight? We'd have to vote by next time. And so there isn't any time for a back and forth with FinCom. And also, I'm not sure FinCom is prepared to address the capacity issue either. Dean.
Yeah, I'd be prepared to propose a motion in favor of proceeding with the MassWorks grant.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. I'd just like to make two quick comments here. The septic system is not always known, right? So just for the sake of argument, the one for the new twin school, the new Gates Douglas school, is similarly sized. It ended up costing twice as much as the original estimate. It was originally estimated for $600,000, ended up costing over $1.2 million. So you don't know. Okay, well, yeah, okay. Well, and also the design of this is approaching 90%, so there's not too many unknowns in the technical specs, et cetera, for the sewer connection. Fran.
So I just wanted to add that seeing a design with a septic and seeing the design without a septic, just from a design perspective, I would completely be in favor of the sewer for that reason. And the fact that it isn't a supersized sewer is helpful for me. And we've been looking at an empty parcel, and even though Kennedy's was great and it wasn't that, it was attractive, we got their plants, it's going to be such a beautiful parcel that integrates a dog park, another park, and the AHA, elder housing, and getting off of Route 2 is going to be awesome to see that, I think. So I think a sewer in this case would be helpful for this parcel, this development. That was mine.
Okay, so the motion's been made to proceed forward with the MassWorks grants for this project. Any final discussion? Jim?
Would it be helpful for us to encourage that this be a joint MassWorks application with the AHA, or is that already part of what you would, assuming you would do?
Yeah, well, I'd appreciate that encouragement, but it seems like it's the best way to do it, which we would probably pursue if you didn't give us any direction either way.
Great. Yes, no problem.
So in terms of how much this would add to, in terms of how much sewage this would add, and how much closer it would take us to reaching capacity, does anyone have the numbers on that?
Chin will have the numbers on that.
So, based on Title V flow calculation, the design flow, it is anticipated that this project would generate, I'm sorry, the memo's long, 4,730 gallons per day, and that's the max day flow. So right now we have Sorry, just reading my memo. 20,560 gallons per day. So basically 20,000 and then 4,000 that this project is going to take. So it's not, I mean, it's still 4,000, but we have 20. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. I think for me, yeah, I think I do have, and I knew we actually do have an agenda item where we do talk about adding more capacity. But I do think that we should be wary about it, and the fact that we do already have a design plan that's progressing for septic. I mean, my vote would be an abstain at this point, but happy to, because we already have a motion and it's seconded. We can go forth with that vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I just would like to add that the design flow, the Title V design flow on the max, daily flow on GPD is really conservative. So the general use would be lower than that on the day-to-day basis. Yes.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, we'll vote now. All in favor of moving forward with the MassWorks grant for this project, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
You said aye?
Yeah, I said aye.
And any opposed? No. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay, so I'm going to also vote aye, so it's 4-0-1. Thank you very much, Chin and Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
And so, Mr. Manager, the update on the rehabilitation project.
Yes, and we have, so in the last project that Chin was just talking about, our design consultant is GPI. They're helping us with the design for this extension. I'd like to actually ask if Jack Troidel, who works with us from Woodard and Curran, who's the design consultant for this project, which is the treatment plant rehabilitation project. Last summer at town meeting, the last outdoor town meeting, hopefully we'll ever have, the town approved moving forward with a project to rehab the existing treatment plant. And we just opened bids for that last week, and it came in much higher, certainly much higher than we wanted it to. And so what we're proposing to do, which we need permission from DEP, because they're providing some funding, and we want to see if they'll hold on to it for us, is we're restructuring it to try to capture the primary portions of the project, and with the idea that we would find a way to address the secondary portions that were included in it at a later time. And the main reasons for the cost increasing were things that you're hearing about on the news, shortage of labor, shortage of difficulty in obtaining materials. Jack, do you want to continue and talk about how this, where we are now?
Yeah, exactly. And as John was saying, the costs certainly came in very high. And over the last 12 months, the wastewater market, construction costs have skyrocketed. Things like ductile iron pipe have doubled in price in the last 12 months. Diesel went up. We just see a lot of escalations and uncertainty. And kind of the last thing is a lot of the equipment and other purchase prices are only held for about a week. So the contractors are pricing in that uncertainty. We're looking at scaling the project to the critical components, which are primarily at the treatment plant. There's some pump station work that we've cut out of the project. And then we've moved some of the other core work into bid alternates to give the town some flexibility to award it. We are looking at about a 2-month delay, and that's what that extension request to Mass DEP is. Typically for SRF funding, they require a contract signed by June 30th, but we're looking to push that by 2 months. There included in that was about $334,000 of principal forgiveness. So that was some ARPA money that came out this spring, and the town wanted, or working with John, we wanted to preserve that forgiveness. So that's part of that 2-month extension, but hopefully, according to the current schedule, we'll have a bid opening in June. So it's a very quick turnaround here, and we'll get that pricing and then we'll get it out to DEP, but it would be in that August timeframe for actually contracting with the project.
And just to further, if for some reason DEP says, no, sorry, we're not going to allow that, what we would do, Jack, is we would try again next year. And we don't see the climate getting any better in terms of pricing, so we're hopeful that they let us do this now.
Yep.
Questions? Jim?
So remarkable cost increases in this kind of, wastewater work. So that suggests to me that the estimated cost of the sewer work to cross Route 2 is going to go way up as well. Do you have any comments on that?
I will just comment that I think vertical construction has definitely escalated more. I don't think the horizontal work for pipe work has gone up as much, with the caveat that the pipe material and diesel have definitely gone up in price. But it's not as severe as the treatment plant work. And part of that is also that you typically have more contractors that are doing that type of work. So we only had one bidder, and we actually were reaching out to all the potential contractors, trying to get them to bid. And they're so busy, there's so much work out there that they were just said they declined. They said, sorry, we're too busy bidding, certain other projects that are closer and easier. So it's very, very challenging, and it's more unique there. Whereas I think on the, pipe work, you have a bigger pool of bidders, and you don't see as large of pipe increases.
Thank you.
Or price increases.
Other comments, questions? The only question I had is in the infrastructure bill that passed, there was money targeted for wastewater. Is there any possibility of getting a grant there?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. We are in discussions with our federal delegation to see if there's any interest in helping support this effort. That's not something that we would know probably before the end of the fall, or early fall. And if we're successful in that route, it would be helpful. But we need to try to plan for making the project fit to what we have for now. And that, that would be an opportunity for us to then tackle some of those pump stations, because there was 12 pump stations that were part of the network that we were trying to upgrade as part of this, and we're not going to be able to do any of them, or only a couple of them.
Yeah, we aren't going to do the pump stations, and that was going to get pushed out. We did think that they provided more opportunity to try to chip away at it or do a separate project in the future. Again, then that type of work, also you're in a different mix of contractors, and you have a lot more of those small and medium-sized contractors that are doing pump station work. So we think you definitely see more competitive pricing on that as well.
Thank you. Okay. I guess we're ready to move on to the last sewer item.
Thank you. So this item is, following up on the discussions that, we have every time the sewer commissioners meet, basically, but we had a pretty helpful session on St. Patrick's Day this year, where we sat for an hour and a half or 2 hours and talked about sewer and some of the history of it. And one of the things that is in a constant theme is concerns about discharge capacity. We have a plant that can treat much more than we're able to discharge based on the DEP permits. And, preliminarily, we've looked around and seeing, what options are available for us to increase our discharge capacity by adding more rapid infiltration basins, which are those big dirt things you could see across near Stop and Shop on the right, going down High Street. Those are where the water goes after it's treated, and it settles into the ground from there. What we would look to do under this proposal is, instead of trying to find some perfect parcel somewhere to add a couple more of those, or however more we think we may need for the future, as an interim measure, work to add one more, or as many as we can fit, I doubt it's more than one, on the existing Adams Street site, which is, acquired, which was, whenever the town acquired it, it was for the purpose of this wastewater plant and the related facilities. So what we have is a proposal to do some geotechnical engineering work and some other feasibility study work, which would start the process, which is probably a 3-year process, to develop a new rapid infiltration basin on the Adams Street site, which would provide for us more of a buffer from the capacity constraints that we're discussing and concerned about for the future, to allow the town to continue to support projects that are within the district and households that have been connected for 20 years but just haven't had a need to yet connect, and they may have it in the next 5 years. This would give us the opportunity to make sure that we have a continued adequate supply to support those and other select board priorities that come up that are important as it relates to municipal sewering, like the one we just talked about, like the AHA, which is a project that would be made possible by having capacity to do it. So the study, I believe, is proposed to cost around $100,000. We have funding in a gift account that was created in the mid-90s when the Mill Dam project was being permitted. At the time, the developer agreed to provide, I believe it was $300,000 for purposes related to how that project was to be, infrastructure for that project, primarily focusing around sewer and other items in South Acton, which, that project is right near the bridge there. And there's about 160,000 remaining in that account, and it's been there since 1997 or 8. And so I think that this is a good opportunity to use some funding that was initially set aside for sewer facility and see if we can use it to identify how much of a rib we can add to the Adams Street site. And then there's $1 million more of investment that would be required to actually do it. But this would give us the geotechnical data to know exactly if it's feasible or not from a water flow standpoint and everything else that they look at when they do geotechnical work. Jack is available to answer any technical questions about that, and I look forward to any other questions on the concept.
Questions, comments? Jim?
Would the feasibility study include cost estimates and how that would impact the sewer rates?
This effort would include additional site investigation. So it's primarily focused on working with Mass DEP and evaluating the site, putting in some test pits and borings, and doing the hydrogeological work of building a model. It does stop short of going beyond that because it was, let's see what the model results are and capacities and get DEP approval on the final steps for that effort. I do think, so I guess that's where that report would end. It'd be a lot of investigative work and a summary memo and effectively the groundwater model. The next step would be doing a full hydrogeological report, but we didn't include that in the effort because if for some reason the modeling is, or if the site's determined to not be as beneficial as we thought, you don't want to invest all that money if you don't need it. But we think it's a good, viable path forward. As far as rates, I guess just bringing back some of the history, I think the plant was constructed with much more capacity than the ribs. I mean, I think the current discharge site was limited by the site, not by the anticipated future need or capacity of the plant. So there's still quite a bit of capacity in the existing treatment process and building, and it's all restricted by the discharge. So I think being able to use more of that would certainly help in the rate analysis.
Just a follow-up comment. I guess my concern is that we're in a cost spiral situation with the sewers where to expand the capacity is either going to require relatively expensive work on-site with ribs or very expensive site with off-site ribs. That's going to raise the costs to the point where new people won't want to come on. Because it's just going to be so expensive, which means that the existing users are stuck with the, increasing costs. Because we're going to need that rib. If I remember from our, Patrick's Day presentation, we need that rib just to serve the people that are already in the sewer district. So, that cost is, in my mind, already committed. And I don't see a positive way forward, and that disturbs me. That's all. I wish I had a better picture to draw.
Other comments?
Yeah, so just reading through the memo, would this be 105,000? Is that what it's estimated this to cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So for me, I think we have talked about the capacity issues. I think that exploring whether this could be a potential solution, I think is okay. But my question is, because to Jim's point about this being truly just an initial cost, because then you got to think about the finances, and then, this is only just seeing whether such a project is even feasible or not, and then all the other costs down the road. So my question is, could there be potential grant funding for this? What does that look like?
Yes, that's part of the urgency in my mind for doing this work now instead of waiting for another time. Is that with all the money that's being distributed through the federal relief programs and the heavy focus on infrastructure, particularly wastewater and water infrastructure, it seems that by having a project that's closer to designed would position us well to seek that funding and be able to reduce the cost to ratepayers for making these investments. And so I think that's grants are a very good possibility right now. I think we do a good job getting grants, and I think now that there's so much more money available for infrastructure, I think it's a good position to put the sewer district in, is to have access to those resources.
So I'd like to point out two things just to address some of Jim's concerns. One is when the remaining users hook up to the sewer system, they become ratepayers themselves, right? So that defrays some of the costs. Second is, this is a very efficient way of getting capacity because very little infrastructure needs to be built in order to get the capacity. So there's a lot of capacity per dollar, and then therefore the ratepayers go against the whole thing. And the more people we have hooked to the system, the less the cost for people that are already in the system, or the more stable the cost would be. Finally, the hookups, I've said a few times that the hookups are asymptotic, right? And they're nearly flat now, right? They're you'll never, in the way that works, you'll never get the last person to hook up, right? The last one will never happen. And right now, the rate of new hookups within the district for people that are just normal people that have paid their betterment and they just want to hook up, it's very small. Right? We use our sewer capacity to support three things, which I think are very important to the town. Right? Affordable housing, supporting local businesses, especially as they change from retail to other uses, and the environment. And so some of the environment things are obvious, right? We've talked about lots of times that the water treated in the wastewater treatment is better in all respects than water coming out of a septic system. But there are two other things that we can also think about here. Should there be a need in the future to remove PFAS, that can be done in a wastewater treatment plant. That can never be done in a septic system. So water that, PFAS that comes in our water, comes into a septic system, is going into the ground. It's a forever chemical. But there are ways to remove it if we needed to do it from the wastewater treatment plant. And second, and really exciting in my mind, is wastewater treatment plants can become a means to capture carbon and prevent it from going into the atmosphere. There are already plants in progress in production around the world, in a few places, not a lot of places yet, but one of them's in Pennsylvania for carbon capture, and that carbon doesn't go into the atmosphere at all. Basically, they make almost a biofuel, like kind of coal, basically artificial coal. And if you don't burn it, coal is stable, right? And so the carbon doesn't go into the atmosphere. So if all wastewater treatment plants do this, there's this constant supply of carbon that doesn't go into the atmosphere. To me, that's a very exciting thing. And I think supporting affordable housing, local businesses, and environment, those things are hugely important. So I will take public comment now. First in the room.
Thanks, Alyssa Nickel again. So this seems to me to be, I can't remember who said it, but a great way to increase discharge capacity because there isn't a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built, and we obviously need more discharge capacity for existing folks that are in the sewer district. And I just want to express that while this sounds great, I am really skeptical that Mass DEP is going to grant us additional discharge capacity because, as Jack mentioned, it was the site that restricted our discharge capacity in the first place, and we have in the past asked for an increase, and it was denied from the Department of Environmental Protection. So hopefully that will change. I mean, hydrology changes all the time, but I'm very skeptical that that's going to happen. In terms of never hooking up everybody that's in the district, I don't think that that is necessarily going to be the case because there are people who, just before the sewer went in, replaced septic tanks. So if those septic tanks last for 60 or 80 years, my neighbors have a 27-year-old tank. They put it in 1995. It's 27 years old. It can last another 50 years, but they've paid their betterment and they need to be allowed to hook up in 50 years when their septic fails. I also just want to mention, I keep hearing that more hookups reduce rates for current users, or that, the sewer costs for current users are going to go down. They're not ever going to go down. They might not increase as much, but, the analysis that was done by the West Acton sewer expansion residents, that showed that you need an additional 4,000 users before you see a decrease because of the economies of scale. So just adding in the people that are currently in the district, that's not going to make anybody's rates go down. So I'd really appreciate it if we stopped expressing that misinformation to residents. And in terms of water from sewer being much cleaner, that is true. The effluent is cleaner, but the Environmental Protection Agency characterizes sewer versus septic environmentally as equivalent. So I'm willing to agree that, if we change over our wastewater treatment plant to Acton Power Choice Green, then we can, definitely make sewer more environmentally sustainable here in Acton. But we also need to stop telling people that sewer is much better than septic, technologically, environmentally, because it's just not the case. The EPA says they're equivalent. Thanks.
We are moving towards Acton Power Choice Green for the wastewater treatment plant. Justin, could you call on the online hands, please?
Yes, we have one call-in user. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Tara. I have a question and then I have some comments. The comment on the horizontal versus vertical, can you explain what vertical means?
Yeah, sorry, I think you're referencing the cost discussion. Vertical being building construction and horizontal being utility work, typically in the street.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding that if a septic system in the sewer district fails, that by law they have to hook up. My biggest problem with is that you're discussing using people's money without asking them. So in other words, this $160,000, if you gave them back to the sewer users, how much would each get? $500? What other money is available to give back to the sewer users? They've been having the highest rates in the state, and now you're talking about the rehab being twice as expensive, millions of dollars. It seems very much a Ponzi scheme to rely on new users to pay for existing expenses and obligations, new user CapEx. At some point, you can't add any new users, so the bill is going to come due. The concept, as Alyssa said, that the users, that the more users, the cheaper the cost, just hasn't played out because we're adding users, and still the highest rates. I feel like I hope that you table this until you notify sewer users as to what they could be getting back and get input from them, whether they want to expand the system, use their money in effect, or you give them back hundreds of dollars. I'd like to know what they think. The town meeting voted to amend the rehab budget to specifically not to exclude money to expand, exclude spending money to expand. So people spoke about not having existing users pay for expansion. And because of that vote, it seems that it requires a town meeting vote to actually spend their money to expand. Just because you found new money doesn't seem that it should be spent on expansion, especially after such a vote. So if there are capacity constraints, why keep giving away capacity instead of, as the town lawyer suggested you can do, to create a framework, regulatory framework to preserve the capacity that already exists? And relative to the concept of the select board's priorities, I don't think that the select board has voted on priorities. Staff just keeps bringing project after project. It seems very much, it's no impact until there's suddenly a cumulative impact, which again is bad planning. So if you don't know if it's feasible, why keep giving away capacity? So again, I feel like there needs some serious financial analysis before one decides to take this money and use it for expansion instead of giving it back to the users. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final discussion on the part of the board? I just want to say one thing. The voted town meeting, and this was an area the town manager can tell you I've been insistent upon, is that we separate so that it's clear to people in the public projects that involve expansion and those that don't. And so I wanted to be clear in the rehabilitation project. The rehabilitation project was not being done for expansion, but that didn't mean there wouldn't be another project that involved expansion. So. Are you waiting to comment? No? Okay. I would take a motion to approve the use of this hydrologic study for a new rib at Adam Street.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
If there's no final discussion, all in favor say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Mr. Manager, an update on the Regional Communications
Thank you.
Center.
So we've been working with the town of Concord on laying out a framework for how we could combine our dispatch centers and both operate out of the Acton Public Safety Facility in a new entity called the Acton Concord Regional Communications Center. We received funding through the state 911 program in the amount of $900,000 to help with some of the equipment and other work related to that effort. We've hired a project manager, a company called CTA, which we selected after a competitive bid process, and they've been serving as project manager to help us through the steps and to collaborate and coordinate between the two towns and all the public safety staff to make sure that as we're continuing this planning, that the interests of both communities are addressed. And we are meeting again this week. We have about a monthly meeting of the board of directors. The board of directors is the town manager from each town. And so we're meeting tomorrow, I think, and we will be discussing a few things. We need to hire an executive director, which would basically be the department head for the district. The district is set up to be its own entity, and so there'd be a transition process for that to be established and for all the employees to become part of that entity. But it's really enough work that we can't do it without someone that's in charge of doing it. And so the grant funded the executive director position in that $900,000 in addition to the project manager. So we were hesitant to move forward on it just because we didn't want to hire someone for something that didn't exist yet. But we're at a point where it does exist, and we really need that person, that point person, to work with the team to make this thing go forward. So we're looking at the end of the fall of 2023, which would be the target right now for when we do this transition. But there are a lot of things that have to work out perfectly between now and then for that to be the go live date. We do have a good team, and we do have good commitment from both communities in working on it, particularly the police and fire chiefs in both towns are very supportive of this effort, which, as we've mentioned in the past, if there's any kind of doubt in any of those four, it really is a problem for the project, and that's not the case here, which has been very helpful. We did apply for additional funding for FY23, which would give us the rest of the funding we need to build out the dispatch center and the PSF. We basically have a pretty well equipped dispatch center now, but to make it the type of center we need to do this regional district, we need to retrofit it and bring in some new equipment and do a bunch of IT things with fiber and radio signals and all that work, which it all costs money. And this grant, as of so far, is covering all of it. So, people had asked me about, well, where is this in the FY23 budget? And it's not reflected in the budget because we're going to continue running the operation as we have in FY23. And if we do successfully implement the regionalization in the middle of fiscal year 23, it would be not something that would cost us more to do so. So anything that we have that we're recommending in this budget would cover anything we do from a regional standpoint. And then our FY24 budget proposal next year would reflect changes in the structure if they are successfully implemented in the meantime. So I just wanted to make sure that we touched back on this. Selectman Charter has been attending the meetings when we've had them. But if there's any questions that the board has about the project in general, I just want to make sure we had it on the agenda.
Jim?
I take it as a really good sign that the dispatch union negotiations were able to close with this knowledge that the regionalization was happening. Is there anything that would be helpful for us to understand about the contract that relates to regionalization, or is it all in like either details that we wouldn't understand or stuff that might not want to be said until you finish the other negotiations?
Well, I think one thing from a labor relations standpoint that was really helpful in this case is that both dispatch groups in both communities are represented by the same Teamsters union and the same business agent.
Yeah.
So it really helped us communicating what this is and what this isn't to both groups. And, they're going to look out for their members, and we're going to make sure that they have the opportunity to do that in this transition.
Other questions, comments?
You had one little flash on the screen.
Oh, okay. Adam, Justin, could you call on Adam, please?
Yes, go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for the report, John. Just a question. Do we have any numbers on what we expect the long-term annual budget change to be once this new dispatch is in effect? Will we expect a cost increase, a cost decrease to our operating budget?
Yeah, thank you. So as part of the initial work that we did to see if this was a good idea or not, we did a feasibility study. And one of the major contributing factors to how this is a financially advantageous program for us is that the state incentivizes towns to work together. And right now, every year, both Concord and Acton get money from State 911 just to run our operations. But if we're able to join as a district, they will give us what they were giving us now, plus a bunch more, because they want to incentivize these regional operations. So we don't have an exact number that we can report out, and that's something that we're working on. But there is a huge amount of increase in financial support from the state as a regional entity that's not available to individual towns.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Any final comment before we move on? Okay, we'll do the consent items. I will read them. Item 8, approve meeting minutes, April 4th and 15th, 2022. 9, approve executive session minutes, April 15th, 2022. 10, accept grant awards, January through May, 2022. I'd like to hold that one too. Item 11, accept gift planning division for $29,080 from Celestine Properties LLC towards the Sidewalk Construction Fund as stated in the Planning Board decision number 21-03, 3 and 11 Fort Pond Road, Grassy Pond Way, condition number 3.3.1. Committee appointment, Alyssa Nickel, full member, Community Preservation Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2025. 13, board to approve authorizing the chair to sign a letter of support for the MVP grant application for the River Street Dam Breach Project. 14, one-day alcoholic beverage license, League of Women Voters, Nara Park Pavilion, June 1st, 2022. 15, one-day alcoholic beverage license, District 14, Freemasons, Nara Park Picnic Pavilion, August 7th, 2022. 16, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Chantal Kuhn, Magenta Dance Place, 6 School Street, June 4th, 2022. Multiple day liquor license, Boston Events, Nara Park Summer Concert Series. The dates are specified in the detail. 18, accept gift Recreation Department from Sorrento's Pizza for $500 to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. 19, accept gift Recreation Department from Middlesex Savings Bank for $1,500 to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. Number 20, accept gift Recreation Department from Joseph Perry Plumbing and Heating for $250 to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. 21, accept gift Recreation Department for $1,500 from Odessa Concord to support the 2022 Summer Concert Series and special events. Number 22, approved updated charge for the Acton Dog Park Committee. And number 23, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Powerhouse Cafe and Catering, Coleman 9th, 530 Great Road, May 20th, 2022. I just want to note that last one was a late addition to the agenda because it was not available to me 48 hours ahead. So I would take a motion to accept consent items 8, 9, and 11 through 23 inclusive.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving those consent items, say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes unanimously. So I had wanted to hold item 10 because I told folks I'd allow them to comment on this. Jim, did you have something else you'd like to say on these?
No, I'm curious to hear comments from the public on this one.
Okay. If anyone has a comment on the grants, please come to the microphone or raise your electronic hand. Justin, can you call on the online people, please?
Yes, we have a call-in user. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Tara. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm wondering specifically what this grant is for. It looks like it could be for additional traffic stops. It says 3 stops per hour minimum. But I would like to, I haven't gotten the answer on whether it is for technology like facial scanning or recording other data and sending that to who knows who. But I'm very concerned about this relative to not just our status as a sanctuary town, but the concept of over-policing. And I'm nervous about how that impacts especially vulnerable people. So I'd like to know more about this. And I also like to know why it was hard to get me the data before the meeting. I feel like these types of things, especially where it's talking about increasing policing, it's important for people from vulnerable communities to have a chance to review and see how they feel about things, as opposed to just having things just coming up on consent. If it's not controversial, then we should know what it is, right? So I would like to know more about what this is and then be able to comment after I hear what it is.
So I just want to be clear for everybody that the call-in user is commenting about one of the particular grants, the traffic safety grant. There's, I don't know, 10 grants in here. So I just want to make sure everybody knows she's commenting about one grant in particular.
Yeah, I have no problem with the other. Thank you.
John, do you have any comments on what this, the traffic safety money would be used for?
Yes, thank you. So the municipal road safety program is something that we apply to on an annual basis. In this particular year, we applied for support in doing targeted enforcement of speeding. In town hall, we don't get too many complaints, but if we do get a complaint, it's usually about people driving too fast. And we do everything we can from a road design perspective, from a traffic calming, and we're trying several different methods to try to address the issue of vehicle speeds and helping people feel safer on the roads. But one thing that is always in need of more of is enforcement. It's a pretty big community, and we have a few police cruisers on the road at a time. And what this grant would allow us to do is to add more officers to do more targeted enforcement, to try to really address areas where we have received complaints about or that we know to be areas of people that are driving too fast. And that's what this funding is used for. And it's in this year in particular, we're looking at the areas of Central Street and Mass Ave, Main Street and Great Road, and Main Street and Mass Ave. And this isn't a grant to give us people out on the streets to go out and write a bunch of tickets. It's really about education and enforcement. And a lot of times when people get pulled over or stopped by the police from this program, it's an educational opportunity more than it is a ticket.
So I also just want to say, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, that this grant is going to be used to fund the enforcement efforts, not buy any equipment. No equipment's being purchased with this money.
We did not, no, it's not. In the past, we've purchased things like those radar speed signs, which people really like, but in this particular grant year, it's just for staffing.
Tara, did you want to ask a follow-up?
Well, actually, I just want to make sure, like, this is not about facial recognition and buying equipment. So this is just staff time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I would like to, I still haven't gotten an answer on whether or not the town uses any facial recognition or if there are any plans to. I would like very much for the town to be upfront about that, because I was, I noticed that, and through talking to a couple of people, found out that the town had been engaging in license plate scanning, and I'd like to understand whether that was just a test or, you know, what's going on out there. And I think that the public has the right to know.
Okay, we'll see if we can follow up on that with you, but that's really not connected to this particular item.
Okay, thank you. If it's just time, I have no problem with that, and I really, really appreciate the crosswalk stings. I think that is really great, and I love the idea of educating and not just writing a bunch of tickets. And I did have one question. It was about the grant. It said that you had to do 3 stops per hour. What if there aren't anybody speeding? You're just going to randomly stop people? Like, what is? I didn't understand what that requirement was in the grant.
I think it's just it's a requirement to make sure that the funding that's being used is being used to do education and enforcement. So if there's not 3 people speeding, I would be surprised, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Justin, I think there's one more person.
Yes, Adam, go ahead.
Hi, Adam Nolte again. John, if you could just elaborate on that specific grant, and you mentioned increased labor. So just curious, are we adding FTEs to the payrolls, or are we just being able to have existing employees work more hours?
Yeah, it's the second one. We're using our existing traffic enforcement team and then putting them out on extra shifts using this funding.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the part of the board?
I just wanted to thank Austin, who got back to me with some questions about this. And one thing that I appreciated about the language of the grant is that it does have these 3 contacts per hour, but it also has a clause that says nothing in this grant shall be interpreted as a requirement that a law enforcement officer issues a specific or predetermined number of citations. So it's really about contacts. It's not about citations.
And actually, in case people didn't notice, because it was added late based on people inquiring, there was a memo added to the extra information section of our packet, if you'd like to go read that. So if there's no more discussion, I would take a motion to approve consent item 10.
So moved.
Fran moves and
Second.
Dean seconds. All in favor of approving consent item 10, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I would take a motion to adjourn if people don't have anything else.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
So Himogen moves and Fran seconds. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good night, everyone.
Good night.